Hi, welcome to my Fiddlesticks guide. In this, I'm going over everything pertaining to Fiddlesticks, and there's timestamps on the video as well as below it. And everything that I cover pretty briefly here is going to be the abilities, the runes, the build, jungle, the macro, and then a couple of gameplay examples at the end, and then tips and tricks, and then a whole recap of that. So with the most important parts, I think, for people are going to be the jungle, how to mechanically clear the camps, and then how to path, and then why to path, and then how to play in certain matchups. I cover all of that in the jungle section. And the other parts, such as the runes and the build, you could potentially just skip over and then come back to if you're not interested in listening to all of that. As in this guide, as you can see, it's very, very long. And I wanted to cover absolutely everything so that there's just no doubts, or you're just left without something that you'd have to come back to later. So I wanted to be like an entire source of all of the knowledge that I have up until this point, and in general just about everything pertaining to Fiddlesticks. So I really, really, really hope that this video helps you. And now that's it. Starting off with the abilities, and yeah, please leave a like on this video. I don't know, man. Okay, so I'm going to be going over all of Fiddlesticks' abilities. Given the rework, every one of Fiddlesticks' abilities just got a little bit better in one way or another, and that's really it. So it's like Fiddlesticks gains strength in every single facet of his kit. Even his auto attacks are like a little smoother than they used to be. Like, everything's better. So starting off with Fiddlesticks' passive. His passive is a harmless scarecrow. Fiddlesticks' trinket is replaced by a scarecrow effigy. The effigy functions basically like a copycat of Fiddlesticks. You place it, and to the enemy, this looks like Fiddlesticks until they move into range of it, which the circle around it is the range that the enemy could walk into it. Whenever they walk into it, it looks as if it's really Fiddlesticks, as a health bar will appear above it, and so will your character name if those are enabled, and then the effigy will pretend to use an ability on the enemy. So it has the utility in terms of like baiting the enemy into thinking that you're potentially there. Once you're level 6, they will also function pretty much like Sweeper does as well. So if the enemy has placed a ward and you place the effigy near it, it's going to reveal that ward. The best thing about the effigies, in my opinion, is how they can be used as defensive vision, because they last for a very, very long time. On level 1, they last for 180 seconds, and this part of them just continues to scale with your levels. So they last for a very, very long time. So let's show this whole levels here. Level 1, 130. And then level 6, they last for 174 seconds. Level 11, they last for 218 seconds. And then level 16, they last for 262 seconds. So they can provide vision longer than any other ward other than the blue trinket. So if you were to use them to, especially in the late game, if you use the effigies to provide defensive vision in your own jungle, that's how you're going to get the most value out of them, as they're going to last a lot longer in your own jungle than they would, say, in the river, or even worse, in the enemy jungle. The ways that you can use it to bait the enemy aren't really that useful. I'm sure there's meme videos that could give you better examples for that one. So that's really all there is to say about the effigies. They replace your trinket. You cannot buy the warding trinket, blue trinket, or sweeper, but the effigies function as like a warding trinket mixed with a sweeper once you hit level 6. And the duration of them also scales with your levels. So that's the most important part about the effigies. So let's get rid of them. But even as you can see, I'm fast forwarding 30 seconds. They're lasting for a very long time here. Warding trinkets would be dead way, way sooner. Way sooner. They last so long. Okie doke. With Fiddlesticks' Q, it functions, in terms of casting it, it functions exactly how it used to. But now, and by exactly I mean it doesn't function like it used to at all. It used to be instantly you would fear the enemy. Now the Q is a projectile, so it has to travel. It has to travel to the target that you're casting it at. It also has where it deals damage now. So as you can see, it deals 150 to that Scuttle Crab. But It also gains functionality where if you use an ability on the enemy from the Fog of War, they will be feared, and then once you cast the Q on them again, that will deal bonus damage to them. So let's say if I use the E, W, or ult, it will be fearing the target because I'm attacking them from the Fog of War. And then if I cast Q on them again, then it's going to deal more damage if they were already feared. It's not going to fear them again though. So this Q becomes very integral of how you want to layer your damage onto the enemy, because the Q is dealing damage based on the target's current amount of HP. So as you can see here, putting points in the fear increases its duration and then also its damage, but you're increasing damage of percentage of the target's current HP, and then this also has 2% per 100, which goes pretty well with Fiddlesticks' build path, where you want to be getting very high amounts of ability power, and then maybe skipping out on things such as Magic Pin and whatnot, because you can kind of circumvent it so long that you have insanely high amounts of ability power, which you can get through Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm or Water Walking in the runes, and then you can also get it through itemization such as Death Cap and Spellbinder. So, where it deals this large amount of the target's current health, at max rank 20% plus 4% per 100 if they were feared already, that's going to make it so that whenever you cast your W, it's going to be dealing more damage along with your ult, because your W is going to be dealing more damage based on their missing health. So let's look at Fiddlesticks' W. The old Fiddlesticks W could only drain one target. Now it can drain, I'm pretty sure, an infinite amount of targets. So long that you're in range of them, you will be damaging all of them. And this becomes incredibly impactful whenever you're fighting in lanes where you can be draining the minions and multiple champions. That's where Fiddlesticks gets a lot of his durability from, if you can get your drain off without it being interrupted on top of multiple targets. So whenever you're jungling, this has the benefit, I'm sure that you know, in which you can do 2 camps at once. So it has that benefit, and then during fights, it makes it so that you have a lot of sustain by dealing damage to multiple targets, but then also healing off that damage dealt. So Fiddlesticks' W, you deal a bit of magic damage over 2 seconds, but if this drain fully completes, then you deal a large amount of damage at the end of it, and that's really what you have to focus on. Is right at the end is when it's going to deal the most amount of damage. So here's Fiddlesticks' W numbers. At the time Fiddlesticks tethers himself to nearby enemies and then channels for up to 2 seconds, the duration the tethered enemies are revealed, so if they're in a bush, then you're going to have that benefit of being able to still see them. And then also your allies can benefit from that too. So there's no games in which the enemy could hide in a bush to negate it and then also dodge the enemy's damage. So they're revealed, they're dealt magic damage, and with the last tick they deal additional magic damage, but that additional magic damage is going to be where most of the damage from the W comes from. So that makes it so that whenever you're doing your full combo on someone, you can have tools such as Nimbus Cloak and Approach Velocity, where whenever you ult onto them, you can use the Nimbus Cloak and the Approach Velocity to stay on top of them. So like, let's say I ult right here, the target flashes away, use the E, the blue smite, and then you get a little bit past them, and then you use the W. That's what you want to be looking to do. You want to be looking to get way past the enemy when they're trying to run away, and then use the W. And that's why the movement speed tool has become so impactful for Fiddlesticks. And once you've moved past them as well, you've also dealt a lot of damage. You're going to be proccing the Runic Echoes, you're going to be dealing damage with your ult, maybe damage with the E, and then also with your Q and the smite, and then once you've spent literally everything else, that's when you're hopefully past the enemy in a position to get the full drain off, if they're even still alive at that point. So that's Fiddlesticks' W. You want... will soon fall. Okay, man. Nice to know. You want to get the full W off so that it deals the most damage, and that's very important. With Fiddlesticks' E, the old one, you could maybe consider Fiddlesticks' new E a downgrade in some ways, as it now slows and deals damage in this cone, and then targets hit in the center, as you can see in the circle, will be silenced. So you can still silence multiple enemies with it, so that part's good. But you don't have the benefit of like spamming it on, say, the bot lane wave like old Fiddlesticks support could do, but that's completely fine. Fiddlesticks is really just a jungler, and then maybe a solo laner after the rework. So this is going to be the ability you max last. The numbers on it are pretty pathetic. Increasing the slow doesn't really matter, and then increasing the base damage of it doesn't really matter either, and its ratio is pretty whatever. It's really just that last ability to put points in and really worry about. And then with Fiddlesticks' ult, it functions basically exactly how it used to, except now it has the added functionality because of Q's passive, making it so that if you cast an ability on an enemy from the Fog of War, it's going to be fearing them. So what this does, it makes it so that you can fear 5 enemies with the ultimate right as you're ulting. See, as they're all feared. And that's that. And then, of course, you're dealing tons of damage with this ult. And that's really it. It's yeah, I don't know what else to say. It's where you deal the most amount of damage, but then also how you really have huge impact on Fiddlesticks by getting that good ult in which the enemy team is, say, trying to attack your team. Let's say that we were on Baron here, and then the entire enemy team is coming in. If you're ulting from the Fog of War, then you're going to be getting the 4 or 5-man fear into 2-man, 3-man silence into a ton of damage, an absolutely ton of damage. So that's mostly the important parts of Fiddlesticks' abilities. The way that they can interact with each other is kind of interesting. The only things you really need to worry about is casting them fundamentally well. So let's say if we were going for a gank, the target would be right there. I would ult in, I would then Q, E, try to walk past them, and then W. It's about that simple. The combo will change depending on the situations, but that's fundamentally what you're looking to do. Ult, Q, E, W. Or Ult, Q, Blue Smite, walk past them, and then E, W. And for the interactions with Flash, none of them are incredibly useful for Fiddlesticks, as most of the time you're going to be ulting and then flashing on top of targets. That's always how you're going to get the most impact, but in rare like skirmishing situations, you could find yourself where you would need to, like, say, let's say you were in the Fog of War here, you would EQ and then W flash so that you're on top of the target immediately, and your W is still going to go off. Because once you can cast W, you can cast the W and then flash, and it will still be continuing so long that you do it at the initial cast of it. You can also slightly reposition the E with flash. So let's say I cast it right there. If I wanted to land the silence, I could do it like this. Not like that at all. Anyways, you can change the direction of the E with the flash. That's something, isn't it? So I haven't found any use for that ever, but it's there. And you can also Q flash, since the Q is a projectile. But most of the time you're just going to be comboing that with the W anyways, just to speed things up. You could also, I suppose, you could Q, E, and then W flash. Not like that. So that could be a pretty good combo if you needed to immediately get onto a target, especially after you ult and then you're waiting for your basic ability cooldowns to come back up. So yeah, that's it for the basic covering of the abilities. Now I'm going to go on to tips and tricks. So this is going to be tips and tricks, just little things that you can incorporate into your gameplay that are extra, that you really shouldn't put above the rest of the basic mechanics, but yeah. So with Fiddlesticks, there's not a whole lot to his kit in terms of like flashy plays, other than using your flash to fear a target. That's mostly what your whole kit is about in terms of the utility that you can offer. But you can do things like with your E, you can relocate the direction that it's going to cast with your flash. So let's say it will cast here, but then if we flash, it changes that direction so slightly. But I've yet to even use that once as you would have to really misposition it or something, or the enemy would have to move into a spot in which, let's say how that silence is right there, and then I could get the double right there, if even, like sometimes. It's really just about changing that direction from which it's cast, therefore potentially increasing the radius, but since it's your lowest damage ability, that part's not really going to matter. What's usually going to matter is flash fearing people, as that's going to give you the most impact, and there's really nothing to it other than flashing and then fearing them. Like I mentioned in the ability section, you can buffer your flash with both the Q and the W and your E, so with every single ability other than your ult, as if you were to ult, you can't flash during. So with your Q, you can cast the Q and then use the flash so that you can relocate right after you're casting it, therefore saving you some distance. So your full combo would be something like a maybe QE and then W flash, something like that, so that you would be immediately on top of a target and then be able to get that full duration drain off as they would be trying to run away. In general with Fiddlesticks, like let's say a full damage combo out of the Fog of War with your ult, you want to be leading with your ult, and the nice thing about Fiddlesticks' items, kind of regardless of what you're buying, you're going to get a lot of upfront damage. Even regardless of the runes you're running, so long as you're running Aftershock, Arcane Comet, or any of the damage runes, other than Dark Harvest, you're going to get more damage up front as you initially damage the target through Runic Echoes, through Arcane Comet, through Aftershock, etc. As the first time you damage an enemy, as you can see, you're going to get a lot of damage for free there. This ability only deals about 140-ish damage, but as you can see, with the Arcane Comet and then with the Runic Echoes, there's 205 damage. So with that extra damage, it's going to make it so that whenever you use your drain, it's going to deal more damage because the drain deals more damage the lower health the target is. So whenever you ult onto a target, hopefully you're fearing them so that your Q will deal more damage to them, and that's how you get the maximum amount of damage. So let's say that we're ulting. Let's say that we're ulting, and then what you want to do is Q and then E. So Q, E, and then be walking past them, and then use your drain, and then use your smite somewhere in between there, depending on if they're running away or not. If you're trying to completely burst the target, you could do a QE smite W. But if the target is going to live and you need to be able to run them down, which is going to be the case especially in the early game for most champions, you want to ult and then use your Q, your E, and then your drain as you've moved past them, and then probably smite after the slow duration from the E is wore off and the CC duration of the Q, or just the fear from the Fog of War, has worn off. And that's how you're going to get the most damage on Fiddlesticks. But the nice part of it, like I said, basically every item you can build is going to be giving you more upfront damage initially. So even if you had something like Proto Belt, for example, you would Q Proto Belt, not like that at all. Alrighty, you would ult, Q Proto Belt, and then EW probably. Or you would ult, Q, Proto Belt, Smite, and then just W. And then as they were running away, if they're still surviving, you can have the E to finish them off, for example. As the Proto Belt would give you a lot quicker of an extra damage source. It would be dealing more damage than your E would in general, most of the time, and then it would get you on top of the target faster. Things like that is what you should try to keep in mind when going for an ult. But again, the basic combo, without any extra items or anything, is just ult, and then Q, walk past them, E, and then W. You want to get that W off very quickly so that you get the full drain duration off. But as you can see, with Arcane Comet, on a single target, you're always going to get 2 Arcane Comet procs off during the ult. And that's so interesting because you just have lots, it just gives you so much damage. Now apply this to 5 other enemies here. Well, I guess 4. we get 1 Arcane Comet proc, 2, and then almost to the 3rd if I was hitting more targets or higher level, then I would definitely get another Arcane Comet proc. So really, like, it just happens naturally too, but that's how you have to think about the Arcane Comet, that if you're going for any proper fight with Fiddlesticks in which you're leading with your ult, Arcane Comet's going to be giving you more value. But let's say you're in a fight in which you're not leading with the ult, and usually this is just taking bad fights in general where the enemy's like walked in your jungle and then you want to fight them for no particular reason, then yeah, Arcane Comet's not going to be as useful here, because as you can see it's just not up again. So you get the 1 Arcane Comet proc versus what could have been like a cheap shot plus electrocute, or maybe the Predator proc or something. But yeah, for the ult spots on Fiddlesticks, you always have to think about the wall location. So let me bring this up. It's always going to try to push you outside of the wall, and then that's going to determine like where you end up based on where you cast it. So let's say with this wall, I just have to imagine like this is the actual like hitbox of the wall. So whenever I ult over it, it's going to push me outside of the wall, and then that's where I'm going to end up, for example. And you can apply this to every wall in the game pretty much. So it gets kind of weird with walls like this, as you can see, as they are very, very big, and it's not gonna potentially make a whole lot of sense of like where you could end up. So let's just see. If we cast it right here, then we're going to end up way over to the left than where we expected, just because of the max range of the cast of the ability. Let's line this up. Alrighty, and then let's say with this one, pings right here, but then we end up over here. So you need to be pretty practiced in the Fiddlesticks ult spots to actually get some good ones off, or else you're kind of going to be at the mercy of where the walls will like kind of shoot you out, I suppose. This becomes more apparent in especially around objectives and whatnot. If you're ever failing an ult, let's say like you wanted to ult into the dragon pit, but then you click somewhere like right here, and then you're just outside it, because the actual wall is something like this, right? Something like that, then well, it's just your fault at that point. So it's worth going in practice tool and ulting just a bunch, especially if you're playing Fiddlesticks across multiple days. Just spend like 5 minutes in practice tool. Don't like go crazy on it. Just really get a feel for like how the walls work and where you're going to end up with your ultimate. There is pretty cool spots in which you can end up, say, over the entire wall. I forget exactly where it is. I have another video on the old spot. But in general, just always be thinking about, again, like how the wall hitbox really is, and then that's going to give you a good idea of like where it's going to shoot you out. And since you can't cast the ult at such a high range, it's going to be harder to end up like, let's say right here, it's just not possible. So you're better off shooting for being, let's say I cast the ult here, it's going to push me about right here, and then that's going to give me a better ult if the enemy is like, say, on this turret, versus if they're in the lane, then I could try to ult, say, right here, and then that's going to put me a little bit past that so that I could run them down, for example. The ult is obviously very, very important. Whenever you're going to be casting it, the enemy team is likely going to be backing up if they're at any reasonable MMR. At lower MMR, it's as simple as the enemy is like on an objective, right? Like they're all on Baron, and you simply cast R over the wall and they're all going to die. You would R, E, and then Q, W every single time, because you can get a multi-man silence and then just immediately into the W is going to be your best bet if you're already on top of 5 champions. In higher MMRs, the enemies are going to start backing up whenever they know that a Fiddlesticks ult is coming or could come. Rift Herald, man, chill out. They're going to start backing up whenever they know a Fiddlesticks ult is coming, so you have to usually end up spending your flash for an engage, and if your team isn't like there to follow up on your flash into 4 people, it's just a bad play, but if they are, then you can look for that. So sometimes you're going to have to just ult, and then if the enemy's backing up, then you have to flash on top of them, and then use your abilities from there. So you have to be very willing to spend your flash as you're ulting as well, and just be comfortable with it. That's the main thing. Like in practice tool, it's going to be your best bet, because in game you're only going to get so many ults, and the mechanics of doing everything is like really simple to me, but like I've done it too many times, you know? I've done it way too many times. So if you're trying to get better at it and trying to get comfortable on it, just go into practice tool and do it a lot of times. It's not like you're stupid or something if you don't get it the first time. It's just basically do it a lot of times, and then it's going to be very hard for you to mess it up consistently. So that's that. Whenever in the mid to late game, after your initial ult, not a lot of times, but if you don't end up just instantly killing the entire enemy team, right? Then let's say you do this, and then actually let's do it again without the cooldowns on. Let's say you ult over, EQW, and then you're on cooldown for your Q for 10 seconds and then your E for 5. What you need to be doing is positioning on your allies if the fight is going neutral or bad for you, but if you're winning, you can obviously try to move past the enemies and get your second W off, and then as that second W would be finishing, you could go for your second E and Q, and then maybe into your third W. But with that W, if the enemy is going into your allies or running away from you, then you're not going to be able to get a full drain off, and then it's just not going to be that useful. So if you're all the way into the enemies and they're trying to run away from you, they're going to get out of range of this, and then your allies are too far back to help you. So then you're in a 1v4, your allies can't help you, and then the enemy isn't actually taking damage from you because they simply walk out of range of the tether. So if you stay on your allies and then the enemy's still trying to dive onto them, then you can still be pretty useful even when your Q and E are on such a long cooldown because of your second W that the enemy has to respect, because if they're diving onto your allies, then you're able to get the full drain duration off. So yeah, there's that. There's nothing too interesting with the effigies, in my opinion. Even if the enemy was like, let's say, mid lane, you can do things like, say, putting one right here and then be positioned over here so that if they were to check, let's say if they're to ward right there, then you could be ulting from the other direction, and then you can have a play there. But the effigies are mostly just for defensive vision, like I mentioned earlier, because they last so long and they just get a longer duration the more levels you get. So if you just pollute your own jungle with these, then it's so incredibly strong because they're going to last so long, versus whenever you put them in the enemy jungle or even in the river and they just instantly disappear because the enemy walks in. It's like there's no good use in that unless like you're invading them or whatnot, but you might as well use a control word at that point. So that's a couple of small things that you can add to your game. Again, you don't have to mainly focus on these. And now I'm going to go into the runes. Okay, so I'm going to be going very, very in depth with the runes. If you're interested in just a simple answer like this isn't it, there'll be a timestamp, hopefully, near the end of the runes, in which you can just get cut and dry, like here's what to run. But I think it's really important to consider all the options that Fiddlesticks does have, and then really weigh like when you could or should run them. And then also, if you have better understandings of everything that Fiddlesticks can run, then if certain things shift in the meta, if items were changed, if Fiddlesticks was nerfed in certain ways, maybe one rune, one keystone, or one tree would rise in prevalency because of certain aspects of change. And especially with a game like League, things are going to be changing all the time. So with Fiddlesticks runes, I think you need to answer three important questions. The first one, how do you get the most damage? That one being a pretty simple one, in which you ask, from the runes, what can give you the most damage? And if we look at them, you have a couple of damage options. You have Electrocute, Dark Harvest, Predator, Arcane Comet, and that's really it. The other options are kind of troll at that point. So with Predator, Electrocute, and Dark Harvest, they're all going to put you in the domination tree. And you really have to consider the secondary runes that you're running as well, because they are huge contributing factors towards your damage along with the keystone. So let's say if you were to run Electrocute, you'd probably be better off going Cheap Shot, because both of these are going to give you more early game damage. Versus if you were to go Dark Harvest, you're probably best off going Sudden Impact, because that's going to give you the most late game damage. Cheap Shot deals more damage, or deals true damage whenever you slow the enemy, and then it's on a 4-second cooldown, so you could get 2 of those off. And with Electrocute, anytime you deal 3 instances of damage, you get the bonus damage from the Electrocute proc. So that would make it so that if you're skirmishing in the early game, the Electrocute could be more prevalent. But with the magic pin gained from Sudden Impact, and then with Dark Harvest, it functions kind of like an AoE type of damaging keystone, in which it's going to deal less damage early, but you can stack it up across the entire game. So even if you're not killing targets, you can have this stacking component of Dark Harvest, which is very useful for Fiddlesticks, since you're a champion that scales pretty much infinitely. And then with Sudden Impact, this magic pin that you get from it is going to become very, very impactful in the mid to late game whenever you're getting 5-man ults, or should be getting 5-man ults, anytime any fight is happening. That magic pin is going to be giving you, it can give you somewhere around 100 damage if it's very low, to like 300 damage in a good team fight. And that's pretty big for a minor keystone. And then the third row here in the domination tree, you're going to get your ability power in some form, whether it be through clearing wards with Zombie Ward, placing them with Ghost Poro, or getting kills and assists with Eyeball Collection. Basically, all 3 of these runes are just giving you 30 ability power one way or another. And then for the fourth row, all of these are pretty useless for Fiddlesticks. The extra movement speed gained isn't really that useful, unless you have to get in flank positions against the enemy. And then the ultimate cooldown reduction might seem really good for Fiddlesticks, but in my experience, it's like by the time Ultimate Hunter is stacked up, you're going to be in a lulled mid game in which nothing's happening. So your ult was going to be up for every fight that was or was supposed to happen anyways. It can be a nice luxury in solo queue to have an ult up when a random fight breaks out, and then you can clean it up like that, but that's really the biggest value of Ultimate Hunter. With Ravenous Hunter and Ingenious Hunter, they're both completely useless for Fiddlesticks though, so they're just not options at all. Having extra healing on your abilities isn't important, because whenever you initiate fights on Fiddlesticks, you're going to be full health every single time. And it's not like the enemy's going to turn onto you. Ravenous Hunter could be good, but the utility and the movement speed to help you move around the map and then get in positions for flanks is probably going to be outweighing it. And then having your ult up more often is probably going to be outweighing it as well. That, and it's just so hard to get value out of Ravenous Hunter in the early game. So it's like you'd be picking a lot of scaling with the domination tree if you were to go something like this. Or you could be all in your early game with something like Electrocute and Electrocute, Cheap Shot, Ghost Poro, and Relentless Hunter. Or Predator, Cheap Shot, Ghost Poro, Relentless Hunter. With the rework to Predator, It's helped Fiddlesticks' viability with running it, because with Ult Predator it was just bad. You would basically be telling the enemy, here I come, I'm going to ult over the wall. And then once you've ulted over the wall with Predator active, once you touch them with the edge of your ult, you lose the bonus movement speed. That's how the old Predator functioned. The new one isn't so bad. It makes it so that it doesn't tell them as like until you're close enough to them that you're coming with Predator. It can also help you get ganks off pre-level 6, in which you're just farming your camps and then moving into a side lane, for example, and then using the Predator from River, and then flash fearing or something. It could help you do things like that. In terms of its usefulness outside of that, like if you're not getting ganks off with it early game, it's just a worse rune compared to the other options, as they just have better scaling. And it's something that's just so not necessary for Fiddlesticks in my opinion, because you have so much, you just farm so much faster than every other jungler, that to waste that time on using Predator instead to like run it side lanes to see if you get kills is kind of a waste. Kind of a huge waste. And then the last damage rune is Arcane Comet, which might seem weird to some. With Arcane Comet, whenever you damage a champion, you hurl a comet at their location. So you have to think how you're going to be leading fights with Fiddlesticks. You're always going to be leading it with your Fear, your Blue Smite, or your E. Every single one of those are going to guarantee a Comet proc. With Comet, it also has where if you damage the enemy with other abilities, then it reduces the cooldown of Arcane Comet. Fiddlesticks has lots of ways to damage enemies, and especially multiple enemies. So with single target, you reduce the cooldown by 20%, with area of effect 10%, and then damage over time 5%. Fiddlesticks has all of that. So let's say you ult over a wall, the enemy's feared, the Arcane Comet is guaranteed to land, you're damaging them with the ult, you blue smite them, you E, and then you're Wing them. You're going to get another Arcane Comet proc off very quickly. So you can get 2 of them off in an all-in just on a single target. Now when you apply this to 5 champions that you could be ulting into, you could get probably like 3.5 Arcane Comet procs off, and then by the time your basic abilities would be up for the second rotation of them, you could get the 4th Arcane Comet proc off. So you can get the most damage possible at most stages of the game with Arcane Comet. And then with Arcane Comet, it puts you in the sorcery tree, and all of the options that are good for Fiddlesticks here are really good for him. First one being Nimbus Cloak. With Nimbus Cloak, after you cast a summer spell, you gain a movement speed increase that lasts for 2.5 seconds and allows you to pass through units. That movement speed increase is higher the longer the cooldown of the summer spell that you cast. So whenever you would use your blue smite, the enemy becomes slowed and you gain movement speed towards them. And this is incredibly useful for Fiddlesticks, like I showed in the ability section, in which you can blue smite the enemy and then move past them so that you have more distance on them, so that you can get the full drain duration off, therefore dealing way more damage, because the drain deals the most amount of damage at the end of it. So if you can get that off, then that's how you maximize your damage. It's also going to help you in staying on top of targets, because whenever you're ulting in as Fiddlesticks, the enemy is going to be trying to peel you with everything they have. And Nimbus Cloak helps you negate a little bit of that peel, whether you've been knocked up, slowed, or stunned or something. It's going to help you stay on the target by just getting more movement speed towards them. So incredibly useful summer spell. It also has the added bonus of like the defensive utility. If you're out of position, or if the enemy jungler is invading you, you can usually just blue smite them and fear them and then run away because of the movement speed offered by Nimbus Cloak. One of the best runes for Fiddlesticks, and the fact that you can get it in a primary tree if you're running Arcane Comet without huge trade-offs is really nice. I'm going to take a drink of water. Okay, in the second row, Nullifying Orb could also be a kind of okay option if you were against a lot of AP. With Nullifying Orb, whenever you take magic damage that would reduce you below 30% HP, you gain a magic damage shield based on your level and a little bit of your AP, and it's on a 1-minute cooldown. So if you're against 4 AP champions, for example, you could run Nullifying Orb and then rush Banshee's Veil. Banshee's Veil being a very good item for Fiddlesticks in general, and then really just be unkillable to the enemy team comp. So that could be pretty interesting. For the third row, but it's situational. It's situational. For the third row, I think Absolute Focus is going to be your best bet. 10% CDR at level 10. Since you're not building any other CDR items in most cases for Fiddlesticks early, it's just not that useful. 40% CDR on Fiddlesticks does feel nice in the late game, but it's really about being more consistent with your damage and having large amounts of AP. That's going to be giving you more consistent value across multiple games, and then just in general in how Fiddlesticks wants to function. If you're snowballing out of control, maybe you could have more impact through having 40% CDR, but the likelihood of you getting there, and then even if you're there, you're already winning anyways, so you might as well just have an overkill amount of AP so that the enemy can't even come near your team. Because yes, you could provide more utility for your allies with more Q and E cast, but if you're simply killing the entire enemy team or have the threat to kill the entire enemy team with the ability power that you could have through other runes and then through other items that you could build, that's probably going to be outweighing the CDR version of Fiddlesticks. With Celerity, it's also just not that good. You don't have the movement speed from Fiddlesticks' passive anymore, as that was changed. And even though you do want to be staying on targets, like Nimbus Cloak and Approach Velocity are going to help you do that anyways. You don't need this extra movement speed from Celerity to stay on targets. So that's why I choose Absolute Focus. With Absolute Focus, while you're above 70% HP, you gain an ability power bonus, and then this bonus is based on your level. Since you're going to be getting, like, hopefully the second most levels in the game if you're farming the jungle correctly, you're going to be building up the Absolute Focus bonus a lot faster. And then Absolute Focus in combination with Water Walking or Gathering Storm is just going to give you a lot of free AP. So you could come into the mid game with, say, Runic Echoes, Sorkpin Boots, and a Spellbinder, plus Absolute Focus and the Gathering Storm, all of which are going to be contributing to your very, very high ability power values, and then also potentially empowering, say, the bonus ability power percentage you get from Spellbinder or even a Death Cap. So with the fourth row, you have the interesting option of choosing Water Walking or Gathering Storm. With Water Walking, you gain 25 movement speed and an adaptive stat bonus. You gain basically bonus ability power based on your level while you're in the river. So if the team comps show themselves to be primarily fighting around objectives, which is most team comps, the only time you have to really consider when the enemy wouldn't want to be fighting around objectives would be if they have champions like Fiora, Tryndamere, for example, where they're going to be split pushing. Like, they have to split push. Champions like mid lane Irelia, you know? If those champions have to split push, then Water Walking loses a little bit of value. The movement speed you gain in the river is also pretty useful in general. If you're ever fighting around Scuttle, it helps there. If you're fighting around objectives, that's when it really, really helps. But it also helps whenever, say, you farmed all the way to one side of your jungle, the enemy jungler is ganked on the other side. It helps you move past the river faster to get into their jungle, to counter jungle their camps, and then also helps you escape out of their jungle later. And then if there's any posturing in the river, it also helps with that, because having more movement speed just makes things easier for Fiddlesticks, as Fiddlesticks has very low movement speed. With Gathering Storm, you gain ability power every 10 minutes, and it's really that simple. If the game's going to go later, then Gathering Storm's always going to be outweighing Water Walking, but in solo queue, Water Walking is basically always going to be better. Until you're playing at higher MMR, in which you can guarantee that games go later, which you can't even do in solo queue. Even if you're playing in Challengers Korea, like, the game's not going to go to 40 minutes. It's just not going to. So most games you're going to be playing with the plus 24 ability power offered at 20 minutes with Gathering Storm, and then if it goes to 30 minutes with plus 48, that's when you're really hitting great value with Gathering Storm. And then if it goes even later than that, you've hit you've hit the jackpot, and you might as well play the lottery. Thanks for watching. Jeez. But in solo queue, like, Water Walking is going to be beating it out simply because it has better early impact and gives you a lot more value in very high variance plays. So I'd recommend Water Walking over Gathering Storm until you're playing at higher MMR. And then with Gathering Storm as well, you need to consider if your team comp is a scaling one in which the champions would be okay playing for late game. So let's say you have a Nivea mid lane, Ezreal, ADC, things like that, then you could consider going Gathering Storm over Water Walking. So that answers the questions of like, how do you get damage from the runes? Now, let's ask another question. How do you gain utility through the runes? And really the only utility runes Fiddlesticks could run would be, I suppose, like a Phase Rush, Glacial Augment, and then Unsealed Spellbook. With Phase Rush, you could gain extra movement speed once you damage the enemy with 3 instances of damage, which you could do. You could ult, Q, E, and then Blue Smite. That would proc it, and then you could run past the enemy. But Phase Rush for Fiddlesticks is going to be achieving basically what Nimbus Cloak already does, but in a way that you have to do this mini game where you cast your 3 abilities on them, and then you get the bonus movement speed at the same time that you'd be getting the bonus movement speed from Nimbus Cloak anyway, since you would have to incorporate your Smite into this in most cases. And then you're also losing out on a damage rune, whether it be Arcane Comment, Electrocute, or Dark Harvest, or even Predator for that matter. Like, you'd be losing out on those so that, and these runes are pretty important regardless of which one you run because they're giving you higher initial damage, all of them except for Dark Harvest. But even Dark Harvest is going to be giving you some benefit where, let's start with the initial damage. With Electrocute, Predator, and Arcane Comment, you're always leading your combo with these, and then they're dealing damage to the enemy. And since your W is dealing damage based on their missing health, it's important that you deal a high amount of damage with your initial combo on them, so that whenever you finish the combo with the drain, then they have less HP and then therefore are more likely to die to the drain. And if you're not doing that, then you're really just going against how Fiddlesticks' kit functions. So Phase Rush could help you stay on a target, but it's just not that important. It really isn't. It could help you run away too, but it's really like Nimbus Cloak, the keystone for Fiddlesticks, it feels like, in my opinion. With Glacial Augment, it's just super unrealistic for Fiddlesticks. You already have enough CC in your kit through your E and your Q. You don't need the slow on your auto attack, and then also itemizing the Glacial Augment items in GLP and Twin Shadows is just too expensive for a jungler. By the time they've completed them, it's like 22 minutes in, and it just doesn't matter. That and the build path for them kind of sucks for Fiddlesticks jungle. So it has like everything going against it. With Unsealed Spellbook, it's not terrible. It's weird to me that most Fiddlesticks jungles around the world right now are running this because of the extra summoner spells offered. And then they run something like Nimbus Cloak Water Walking, but it's like they are giving so much to their team by running Unsealed Spellbook rather than putting the power in themselves, which they should be doing because Fiddlesticks is a hyper carry in the sense that the enemy team has to respect his ult, and if they don't, then they lose the game. Fiddlesticks can literally 1v5 a fight so long that he can get a good ult off and then his drain's not interrupted. So with Unsealed Spellbook, you gain the benefit of having these extra summoner spells. But you have to think, like, what summoner spells are you getting that's really that useful? You get like a Cleanse, a Heal, an Exhaust, an Ignite, a Teleport, a Barrier, and then Clarity, I think? Like, none of these are really insane value for Fiddlesticks. The 2 highest value ones being Ignite and Exhaust. But Ignite is just making up for your keystone difference. Exhaust can be okay, but is really just giving utility to your team. Because if you're exhausting the target, it's not going to make or break like you beating them because you don't have the other minor runes. The other minor runes that you get from the inspiration tree aren't giving you damage. You could have something like this, for example. And then you don't have Absolute Focus, you don't have Gathering Storm, or you don't have Cheap Shot or Sudden Impact. And then on top of all of that, you don't have a damaged keystone. So you're missing out on that initial damage. So even if you had Exhaust, like that's not making or breaking things for a Fiddlesticks because you need that higher amount of initial damage along with the free ability power you can get from minor runes, whether it be Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm, or Zombie Ward, Ghost Poro, Eyeball Collection. And then with a Teleport, it's like, here comes Fiddlesticks Teleport. Sure, it might work 1 out of every 20 times. in which you get a kill for it. But like it's really like you're teleporting a Gangplank in or something. It's super strange. You should probably be farming elsewhere on the map, or you should have been in a position to counter the play that was happening on the map anyways, before having to teleport there in the first place. So I think that's super low value. You never need the mana. You never need the extra HP from Barrier. Heal is okay. Cleanse is just luxury. So I think Unsealed Spellbook is like a 4 out of 10 on Fiddlesticks, in which you give up so much, like so much value that you can get for your Fiddlesticks. It's worse for his team in a sense as well, because if Fiddlesticks himself is not a threat, then the champion sucks. You might as well have picked like Ornn Jungle or Sejuani Jungle with Unsealed Spellbook. Any tank in the game with Unsealed Spellbook is probably going to be achieving what Fiddlesticks wants to, like with this Keystone. Yeah, so with Unsealed Spellbook, you end up in the Inspiration Tree. Your best secondary rune's probably going to be Free Boots, saving 300 gold, and then Biscuits aren't bad. You could also run Futures Market, but I don't see any play with Futures Market that would be wildly impactful, because all of your items are fairly expensive anyways, that you're not like buying support items like an Ironwood with Unsealed Spellbook, in which you're completing like two 2,100 gold items by mid-game, and then that's having higher impact than the enemy's like 3,000 cost item, for example. Biscuits also aren't that useful because it's really hard to run out of mana on Fiddlesticks, and that's what the huge value of Biscuits are. But they're probably your best bet, because at the very least you could sell them, and then you could get a little bit of gold from that, basically achieving what Future Markets wants to do, but in a lesser way, but while also giving you extra mana and then maybe helping you in a fight. Like, really sucks. Approach velocity, you gain 7.5% movement speed towards nearby enemy champions that are movement impaired. This bonus is increased to 15% to movement, 15% movement speed for an enemy champion that you impair. So anytime you ult and the targets are feared, you get more movement speed towards them. Anytime you use your E, you get more movement speed towards them. Anytime you use the blue smite, you get more movement speed towards them. You see what I'm like? This is the highest value rune for Fiddlesticks in the Inspiration Tree. So approach velocity alone is beating Unsealed Spellbook, which is insane. So I really don't like Unsealed Spellbook. So that was the question of how do you gain utility from the runes for Fiddlesticks. And the answer is all of the options suck. Oh yeah, wait, I forgot to mention Prototype Omnistone. This sucks because let's say you press the attack. Alrighty, and that's why Omnistone sucks. Now let's answer the question, how do you gain extra durability? There's really one option, and that's going to be Aftershock. With Aftershock, it's surprisingly useful on Fiddlesticks. Whenever you CC an enemy, you gain 35 armor and magic resist, and then plus 80% of your bonus armor and magic resist, and then it deals damage based on your level and then based on your bonus health on the area around you. So like you actually are going to get this damage off too, because every time you ult onto someone, you're going to be on top of them. So it's very likely that you get that damage off. And then it's on a 20-second cooldown, so that's very nice if there's any extended fights. And it also potentially opens up your build path, in which you could go like, say, Runic Echoes into Zeke's Convergence, for example, where you could get both armor and magic resist, and then also have the Zeke's Convergence passive for a carry on your team. And then that slow could also be setting yourself up for more damage. So let's just look at the rest of the resolve tree, and then I'll talk about like when you could run this. So the second row, you have the options of Demolish and Font of Life. I think you should be looking to go Font of Life because it's giving more utility to your team. The Demolish proc is only going to be useful in the early game, and if you're going to get a turret plating, you're going to get it regardless of Demolish for Fiddlesticks. So I think you're better off just giving more effective HP to your entire team with Font of Life than you would be getting extra turret plating pretty inconsistently, because past the turret plating time, Font of Life is just going to be outscaling it all over the place. Like let's say a team fight's happening at 30 minutes. Do you want Demolish or do you want Font of Life? Awesome. For the third row, you have good options in Conditioning or Bone Plating. You're basically choosing, do you want more durability in the mid to late game, or do you want it just in the early game? And the answer for Fiddlesticks is you want it in the mid to late game. You don't have to fight early game on Fiddlesticks ever. You're always going to be outpacing the enemy jungler in terms of your clear speed. so you don't have to skirmish with them, especially with something like Aftershock. You're going to be losing even if you are. If you're trying to skirmish, you need to run Electrocute and Cheap Shot, for example. So with Conditioning, after 12 minutes, you gain +9 armor and magic resist, and then increase your armor and magic resist by 5%. This would synergize just as well with Zeke's Convergence as Aftershock does. And then obviously Conditioning synergizes pretty well with Aftershock, giving you the bonus stats that are then going to be a percentage increase once Aftershock is active, but then also have a percentage increase even when it's not. Just for getting to 12 minutes in the game. So if you can go 0-0-0 at 12 minutes in the game, then you just have more durability than the enemy with Conditioning. And then for the third row, you have the good options of Overgrowth or Unflinching. With Overgrowth, you gain, you basically get a little over a Ruby Crystal in terms of HP, just for like seeing minions die or killing jungle camps across the game. With Revitalize, your heals and shields you cast are 5% stronger, and then 10% on targets below 40% health. This might seem okay because you have a heal in your kit, but champions that use this really well are champions that have both the heal and the shield. That's what this whole thing's balanced around. If it was like you have 30% increased healing, that would be insane for Fiddlesticks, obviously. But since it's this 5% on healing and shielding, you don't have shielding. Like champions that use this well are like Janna, Taric, champions like that. So it's not absolutely useless, but it's not the highest value. The flat amount of HP that you're getting from Overgrowth is always going to be beating Revitalize, except for like in very, 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 very close niche situations. With Unflinching, you gain 10% tenacity and 10% slow resist. These values are increased by an additional 20 whenever based... Oh wait, they changed this actually. You gain 10% tenacity and 10% slow resist. These values are increased up to an additional 20% tenacity and 20% slow resist based on missing health. Maximum value achieved at 30% HP. So it used to be whenever you cast summoner spells, but now it's based on your missing health. So this could almost be useful. It's better used for tanks, obviously, but since this kind of makes you like a pseudo tank on Fiddlesticks, it's not the highest value and it's not going to be beating the HP gain from Overgrowth, but it is interesting to think about, especially if you're playing into a high CC comp. But it's better used by tanks that would be running both Unflinching and Legend Tenacity in their secondary tree, and then also building Merc Treads. So Fiddlesticks doesn't use it that well, but for other tank champions they could. And then for the secondary runes, you'd probably just run Inspiration, as even though you could be getting the extra ability power from say like Nimbus Cloak Water Walking, or Absolute Focus Gathering Storm, or Absolute Focus Water Walking, where you'd be running if you were already running Aftershock on Fiddlesticks, you want to be running this whenever your team has enough damage, and then the enemy team has a lot of burst. So let's say they had champions like Zed, high burst, Kaisa, Nautilus, Zed, Nidalee, and then top lane Quinn, for example. Champions that whenever you ult in, they're going to be able to turn immediately in multiple ways. So it's more important that you can endure their turn onto you and survive it, while also continuing to stay on top of them. And that's what Aftershock's going to help you do. So imagine you're ulting into that team comp. Nautilus casts the hook on you, but you have Aftershock procced, so you're able to endure that damage. Kaisa dumps an auto Q W auto on you. You're able to survive it because of Aftershock, and then you can use your E on them after your initial ult. So you would ult Q, and then eat their abilities, and then E their silence now, and then use your W. And then hopefully you're surviving all of that. And then you add the rest of your team behind you with all of that as well. And then you can provide more utility to your team if you're not instantly dying as you ult in every single fight. So whenever you're playing into team comps like that, you can consider running Aftershock because you gain so much durability with the bonus resistances offered by the active of it, along with Conditioning and Overgrowth. Very, very useful runes. So, and then in team fights that would play out like that, it's like, do you want extra movement speed? And extra ability power? Like, not really. it's really up to your team to make up for damage there by you being able to endure damage. But then you're also achieving potentially more damage because your champion's not instantly dying as you ult in. So saving 300 gold and then having more movement speed towards enemies that you slow is going to be probably best with that. So that's pretty. I think I covered like pretty generally like how do they get damage, how do you get utility, and then how do you get durability. Now I'm just gonna talk about like the individual runes and then how they pertain in terms of value. So Electrocute. Electrocute gives you value in the early game and then falls off a little bit past mid game. Because it can only be used on one target, it has that going against it, where you have to deal the 3 instances of damage. You also sometimes can't choose the target that you get the Electrocute proc off because you have so much AoE damage. So if you're spending this on a tank, you've just missed out on burst damage against potentially the target you want to kill, versus something like Arcane Comet. Arcane Comet is AoE. It can damage multiple enemies. And then since you can proc multiple of those, you can be damaging multiple enemies multiple times. But if you are going to run Electrocute, you need to be playing for the early game, so you need to run Cheap Shot. Cheap Shot, whenever you damage an enemy with movement impaired or action, so anytime you damage a champion who you feared, blue smited, or used E on, then they're going to take bonus true damage based on your level, and then since this is on a 4-second cooldown, you can proc it 2 times in an all-in, and then that can make the difference. And then Ghost Portal is going to be giving you ability power for placing your effigies. You could also go Eyeball Collection since you're playing for the early game anyways. And then probably Relentless Hunter, just so you can attack lanes more often. And then if you were to run Predator, I think you would still want to run Cheap Shot, as Predator shows that you want to be attacking lanes more often with the Predator active. You don't need Ingenious Hunter for the Predator active anymore. The cooldown is low enough. There's never going to be an instance in which you would Predator attack one lane, then Predator attack the other lane. And if you did, I mean, solo queue sucks at that point. So Relentless Hunter is going to be giving you about the same value as it would on Electrocute, and which gives you more movement speed towards the lane that you're trying to attack. I'm going to take another drink of water. Okay, and then with Dark Harvest, you need to be playing more for late game because you have the Scaling Rune, and one that's not that useful until way later in the game. In which case, Sudden Impact's going to be giving you more value because it gives you more damage whenever you're ulting multiple targets versus in the early game when you're really singling out a target. And then with Dark Harvest, I think you should run Ghost Portal because you're probably setting up more defensive vision, and then that's that. So if you're setting up more defensive vision, your effigies are lasting longer, then you're spawning more Ghost Poros, and then you're gaining more ability power from the Ghost Poro faster. Since you want to be getting multiple kills in the early game with Dark Harvest, then Eyeball Collection will lose a lot of value, and then since you're not moving into the enemy jungle, then Zombie Ward would lose a lot of value as well. And then since you're running all this, I think Ultimate Hunter would be completely fine. You could maybe even get away with Ravenous Hunter since you'd be playing for the late game. But Ultimate Hunter is probably your best bet. Because even though you, like I said, Ultimate Hunter falls off in the mid game, it could have pretty good impact in the late game, in which you could fight for an objective with your ult and then be positioning around the next objective and then have your ult up again sooner for that. That's when Ultimate Hunter could give you some pretty good value. And then for the secondary runes with any of the domination tree, if you're running Dark Harvest, I think you should probably just go Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm since you're playing for the late game. But let's say if you're running Electrocute and then Cheap Shot, then you probably just want Nimbus Cloak and Water Walking, as Water Walking is going to help you a lot with your skirmishes, and so will Nimbus Cloak, as it will help you stay on the target that you're trying to hit. Now, if you're trying to fight very, very early in the game, then just run Absolute Focus plus Water Walking, as that's going to be giving you more ability power earlier, and then therefore more damage, versus having the utility of being able to stay on targets whenever you ult. So think about that. And then with Predator, I think with Predator, you'd probably go Nimbus Cloak and Water Walking, as you're going to be ganking lanes, but it's going to be important that you stay on the target whenever you're ganking them. So let's say you're ganking from the river, you use Predator, the enemy's running towards their turret, but then you flash fear them, and then they still try to run away, you use the E and then blue smite them, and then you run past them and then W. That's probably going to result in a kill way more often, and Nimbus Cloak is going to help you achieve that with Predator. So that's that. With the Arcane Comet page, I think that you're best off going with the Inspiration Tree second with Free Boots and Approach Velocity. Free Boots, you gain plus 10 movement speed from them, which is very, very nice for Fiddlesticks, along with saving 300 gold. This saving 300 gold becomes very, very just effective with your early game spike, in which around 7 minutes you should be getting your runic echoes, and then if you've gotten kills, then you can have your free boots and then upgrade them into Sorkpin boots very quickly. So you can be sitting on runic echoes, dark seal, and Sorkpin boots, and then the enemy has to deal with the threat of you ulting over every wall in the game at all times. And then if they don't, then you get dark seal stacks. You later upgrade that into Magi's, etc. So magical footwear helps a lot with your early game spike, along with just being useful even if you're losing because you're saving 300 gold. Therefore, just giving you a kill lead on the enemy jungler regardless of what's happening on the map. With Approach Velocity, again, you gain 7.5% movement speed towards enemy champions that are movement impaired, and then 15% movement speed towards enemy champions that you impair. This is so useful for Fiddlesticks because your movement speed is very low, and it's so important that whenever you're actually fighting, that you're staying on top of targets, and even better, getting past them, so that even when they're trying to run away, you can get the full duration of your W off, therefore achieving more damage. So even though you could have, say, more damage from runes, such as, let's say if you ran Sudden Impact and then Eyeball Collection, both of which giving you damage effectively, Eyeball Collection giving you ability power, and then Sudden Impact giving you damage whenever you ult. Yes, you could be getting damage through these runes, but you're probably getting more damage from the movement speed offered from the free boots and then the movement speed offered from Approach Velocity, because with these, it's going to make it so that you can get that full drain duration off, and then probably achieve more damage that you could get from the other runes, but not from the runes themselves. And then in general for the shards, I like to go Adaptive Force, and then Scaling Health. You don't need armor. Fiddlesticks' base armor is actually pretty high. If you're playing into AP champions, sure, go Magic Resist, especially against early game AP champions like Elise and whatnot. But you should be looking to run the Scaling Health, in my opinion, because it's just going to be giving you more scaling, and that's really the essence of Fiddlesticks in general, just scaling till the end of time and getting more value for getting more levels earlier in the game. Because this is Scaling Health, just feels a lot better than having plus 6 armor, plus 8 magic resist in most cases. Because with the 8 magic resist, it's mostly going to help you in the early game, but not the mid to late game. And the mid to late game, if you're actually playing against a lot of magic damage, then it's fine for you to build items such as Banshee's Veil or maybe like Zeke's Herald. So that's that. For the Resolve tree, there could be instances in which you could run Arcane Comet plus Conditioning and Overgrowth against pretty similar comps in which you would want to run Aftershock, but that's going to be situational, and you just have to identify them yourself. Any of the Domination runes secondary, I don't think beat Free Boots and Approach Velocity like I mentioned. FlyQuest versus 100 Thieves, no thanks. Jeez. Did you see Ignar was inting? Anyways, the Precision tree is just not that useful for Fiddlesticks. Coup de Grace isn't necessary. You're already overkilling champions with your ult anyways. Cutdown could be interesting, but probably not that useful. Even if you were to run any of these percentage damage increases in Coup de Grace, Cutdown, or Last Stand, all the other options aren't useful in the Precision tree. Healing off a kill and assist isn't going to make or break things, and that's the best option that you have here. The extra mana from Presence of Mind, useless. Lifesteal, useless. Tenacity, almost useless. Attack speed, come on. Overheal, it sounds interesting, but isn't. It doesn't work. So, yeah, that's mostly what I wanted to talk about. It's unfortunate that Cosmic Insight's on the same row as Approach Velocity. Cosmic Insight's pretty generally useful, but Approach Velocity is going to be beating it in most cases. I don't think Perfect Timing is actually that good either. Very rare times would you actually want to be building Zanya's first item on Fiddlesticks in general, and if you are buying the stopwatch for 650, versus, because you can't get this plus 10 movement speed from the boots if you're buying boots. You can only get them from the magical footwear, so it's something, it's just an access to movement speed that you otherwise can't get, that to trade it off for the perfect timing stopwatch is a hard sell in my opinion. Hextech Flash is also really funny. It could get you pretty good value in solo queue, but again, to beat free boots and the movement speed that's offered from them that you can't get otherwise really sucks. So yeah, that's most of what I have to say about Fiddlesticks runes. If there's anything else, it will be later in the video. And if you got through this, I mean, here's the default rune setup if you wanted to skip everything that I'd recommend. And to find out why, go watch the rest, man, already. On to the next section. Alrighty, in this section I'm going to be covering the itemization for Fiddlesticks, and I figured to do this I would just do it as if we were playing a real match, because the order of the itemization is probably the hardest part for people, and I figured it'd be worth doing it like this versus just talking about the items. So at the start of the game, you always want to be starting Talisman, obviously. You don't auto attack camps, so Machete is really bad, and if you start Machete, you probably just die to camps. I've never tried it. So you also don't need to start Refillable Potion because you don't need it to clear the jungle. You're going to be full HP at most stages, so you can start Health Potion and then a Control Ward. You can use this Control Ward in a couple of ways. The most common one would be, usually the enemy jungler will ward these pixel bushes in the early game before the buff spawn, so you could put the Control Ward right there to clear their ward. You could also put it somewhere in your jungle to prevent the enemy jungler from invading you. So let's say if you were starting blue, you could put the Control Ward or even your effigy in this bush so that, let's say if you're starting blue and the enemy jungler is starting blue, if they were to go their blue to your red buff, then you'd be able to spot that out and then be able to play from there. Or if they were to do 3 camps, let's say you start blue and they start red, by the time you'd end up in your red side, if they come into your jungle, then you have that information still. So let's do a full clear and then see how much gold we have to play with at the end of it. Okay, so here we are at the end of a full clear. Let's say if we were to recall, we would have this 1,000 gold to play with. Now with that, we could purchase the blue smite, but then we wouldn't have enough gold for the amp tome. So we could also go Fiendish Codex, but then not have the blue smite. So if you were to recall on the full clear, the decision of whether you would get the blue smite or the Fiendish Codex would be one of, are you going to farm or are you going to gank? And with the blue smite, the highest utility for it is whenever you're ganking side lanes, because side lane is a lot longer of a lane. So whenever you end up in it, the enemy has to run a lot further away than they do in the mid lane, for example. So the mid laner's right there and then he's walking away, then he gets back to his turret a lot faster than, say, if the enemy top laner is all the way up here. It takes them a lot longer to get back to turret. So the slow becomes a lot more impactful if you're ganking the top lane or the bot lane. Now you also need to consider which side of the jungle you started on, because most of the time you're going to be starting your blue side, whether you're on blue side or on red side. So you want to be resetting to the side of the jungle that you reset or that you started on, so that whenever you end up there, then your camps are going to be respawned by the time you get there. In our case, we started blue side, so by the time we would full clear, recall, and be back in our blue side, Gromp would be spawned, Wolves would be spawned, and then Raptors and Golems would be spawning. So we could skip Golems and then attack top lane with the blue smite, for example, and then go back into our blue side and then farm from there. So that would be a time in which you could get value out of the blue smite. But if you're not doing any of that, and if those opportunities don't present themselves because of the lane states and whatnot, then you should just go for the Fiendish Codex, for example. So with that in mind, let's do the full clear, but let's do another full clear afterwards because we don't actually have to reset after that Scuttle Crab in most cases, and then see how much gold we have to play with. So once you take the first scuttle, you have the option to take the other scuttle if it's still up, which you should look to do so. But even if that scuttle isn't up, by the time you would walk to the other side of the map, then your Gromp is going to be respawning, and so are your wolves. So you can just wait for them and then take them again, and then full clear your jungle for the second time before recalling. So you're then in a position in which you can recall with 1600 gold, and that puts us at different price points that are more lenient, right? We can buy the Smite, we can buy Fiendish Codex, we could even buy Amtome plus Dark Seal, and then if we didn't have magical footwear, say if we were running Predator or the Domination Tree in general, where you could run Nimbus Cloak and Water Walking secondary, in which case we wouldn't have the magical footwear rune, then you could purchase boots at this time too, and that could aid you in your ganks, all while still being very, very high level, and then very high in gold as well. The timing at which you would recall would also put you in a good position to go for the next respawn scuttle, as well as going to your respawned wolves that are now level 5. So all of that puts you on a pretty good path. But in terms of the itemization, we've recalled with enough gold to buy Blue Smite and Fiendish Codex, which is going to be as ideal as it gets. It makes it so that on your actual first reset, you could look to gank a lane and then also look to farm your camps if there's no ganks available. But if you were to just do the full clear into reset, then if you were to purchase Blue Smite, then you're confined to just ganking, and then if the gank doesn't work out, then you're just at a little bit of a loss because of it. Or if you could only purchase the Fiendish Codex, then you'd be kind of confined to just farming your camps, and then that would be that. But if you do the double full clear, which is very, very easy for Fiddlesticks to do as the enemy jungler has to interrupt him, then you're going to be at a very significant amount of gold in which you get to have the best of both worlds. You get to have the Stalker Blade, which is going to give you more damage and more gank setup, and then you're also going to have Fiendish Codex, which is going to help you clear your camps as well as giving you more damage. So then we could go back out onto the map, and our next price point would be for Stalker's Blade, which is going to be a couple of camps or one successful gank. So then you could have the opportunity to, say, attack a lane, and then if that works out, you could recall into Runic Echoes, my bad. You could recall into Runic Echoes, and then once you complete Runic Echoes, that's when it becomes very, very important, because about the time that you complete Runic Echoes, you probably want to recall for it because the power that it gives you is so significant. So let's just add a bunch of gold here. So let's say that we're level 6 with Runic Echoes. Runic Echoes is 80 ability power, and then this passive synergizes so well with Fiddlestick because, like I've said in everything else up to this, it's all about the initial damage that you deal to a target and then finish them off with the drain. So your full combo is going to be like an ult into QE, Smite, and then drain. And the Stalker's Blade is always going to be adding more burst to that, along with the rest of your runes. So having more of that initial damage onto a target is just so synergistic for Fiddlesticks and is going to be better than if you were to say delay the Stalker's Blade for something like Dark Seal. After you complete Stalker's Blade, that's the perfect time to buy Dark Seal because you're going to be very, very strong and actually be in a position to get kills as you're going to be level 6 and then also have the damage to back it up. So after you get Stalker's Blade, and then you think that you can get more kills after your full clears, then you could get Dark Seal and then look to gank lanes. And then after that, you probably just want to buy Swordpin Boots. And then on the next recall, you could have probably your Medjai's upgrade, and then maybe an Amp Tome. And then if you don't have that, then you could probably just have Amp Tome and Ruby Crystal. This could set you up into building Oblivion Orb, or maybe Liandry's. Liandry's not being the most efficient item. And then if you didn't want to build either one of those items, you could just sit on Amp Tomes themselves, which could go into Proto Belt, it could go into Zanya's, or you could just sit on an Amp Tome, and then on your next recall, if you got some kills and whatnot, you could just get an entirely needlessly large rod, and then that could go into Spellbinder, for example. So what item to build first is always going to be Stalker's Blade. That one's pretty simple. And then your next important item is going to be Swordpin Boots. And then after that, it becomes pretty situational. But I think what you should be aiming for in most cases is going to be Oblivion Orb into either Deathcap or Spellbinder. Spellbinder is cheaper and then also pretty effective for Fiddlesticks because of the movement speed offered. Whenever you use the active, you gain bonus movement speed and then also gain a ability power increase, which is just so synergistic as before you would ult over, you can activate it and then be able to run enemies down with it. The death cap is good, but the extra movement speed offered from this item kind of takes precedent over that for Fiddlesticks. And since it's cheaper, it also helps you get into your second item, and you're basically going to only be sitting on 3 completed items for most of the game on Fiddlesticks. So you could have Spellbinder into maybe completing Morello if the enemy has healing, or into completing Medjai's, or even just sitting on another needlessly large rod for as much AP as possible until you can complete the death cap. And then if Dark Seal doesn't work out, you could sell that for needlessly large rod. And then if it is working out, sitting on it and then sitting on multiple Medjai stacks would be completely fine. Building into items such as Void Staff becomes very odd for Fiddlesticks unless the enemy is actually itemizing a lot of magic resist, meaning like they have Spirit Visage plus Merc Treads plus maybe an Aegis, things like that. But even if the enemy has those items, you need to consider which champions are actually building them. Like if it's just, say, a Darius top lane building Adaptive Helm plus Spirit Visage, it might not matter so much because you can still CC that target and then your ADC can deal the damage to him rather than you having to one-shot them, because if the enemy ADC and mid laner has no magic resist, then Void Staff becomes a lot worse because you could just focus those 2 champions rather than the Darius with Adaptive Helm and Spirit Visage, for example. Now, if you were running, if you were playing to not farm as much and then running the runes in the domination tree, say Electrocute, for example, I think something like Proto Belt becomes a lot more interesting, as you can complete this before any of the other items because it's only 2,500 gold. And then it makes it so that whenever you ult over the wall, you have this immediate gap closer onto the enemy. And then you also deal damage with that. So it's adding to that theme that we like with Fiddlesticks, that is dealing a high amount of initial damage to a target while also helping you stay on top of them or get on top of them entirely. And I would only recommend this with the domination tree because the domination tree helps you have more early power, and then if you're running the sorcery tree, you're going to be benefiting a lot more from higher ability power values than you would be from something like Proto Belt, because Proto Belt, you're getting health, ability power, and then the active, and then also CDR, and CDR is not incredibly useful for Fiddlesticks. So you have that option. You could go, if you're running the domination tree, you could go Proto Belt into, say, Oblivion Orb, and then probably Spellbinder at that point because it's going to be the cheapest item that you can complete, and in this order would be completely fine. But if the enemy built any magic resist, it would start feeling really bad very quickly for Fiddlesticks. But with these items, you'd be able to snowball a lot faster than you would otherwise. So it's definitely something you can look to exploit in solo queue in terms of the itemization. But the best possible full build for Fiddlesticks is probably Deathcap, Spellbinder, Banshee's Veil, and then probably Void Staff. If the enemy has any magic resist, if they don't have any magic resist, I suppose it would be Zanya's, just for the pure utility. And you could also go the last time, or these last two items in general, it's like if you could have Zanya's Banshee's Veil, it's like that gives you the double whammy of resistances along with utility, as they have to get through a spell shield and a stasis. And then you also have the magic resist and the armor, and then a little bit of CDR on top of that. Alternatively, you could go Morella Nomicon and then say a Leandries, both of which giving you a lot of ability power along with extra damaging passives, and then a lot of HP instead of just resistances, which the HP is probably more useful for Fiddlesticks at most stages of the game than the resistances would be, as they would cover both physical, true, and magic damage, whereas whenever you're just sitting on the Banshee's Veil, yes, you're taking less damage from magic damage, but you're taking more damage from true damage, and well, you're not taking more damage from true damage and physical damage, but the damage is going to be sticking more, or you're not going to be resisting as much, versus if you just had flat amount of HP, that covers all bases. So as you would be sitting on the Banshee's Veil, the AD carry could single you out, for example. And then vice versa, if you're sitting on a Zanya's, the Syndra can press R on you and you instantly die, so long that your Zanya's isn't up, for example. So you have to consider things like that. Items to stay away from, in my opinion, are Rylai's. I think Rylai's kind of similar to why I don't like Spellbook on Fiddlesticks. You already have enough utility in this champion already, and given that you can get enough movement speed with Approach Velocity and Nimbus Cloak, I don't think you need this slow from Rylai's. The slow would really just be for your own team and is super unnecessary. Abyssal Mask is pretty bad. Even though it seems pretty interesting in which you could have this magic damage shred passive, the stats offered by it are very, very bad for Fiddlesticks. You're spending 3,000 gold on 350 health. For example, you can get 380 health for 1,000 gold with Giant Spell, and that's most of what the Abyssal Mask is going to be offering you for Fiddlesticks. So you're spending 3,000 gold for 350 health, 300 mana, which you will never use, 55 magic resist, which 40 magic resist is 700 gold, and then 10% CDR, which is again low value on Fiddlesticks, and then the passive 15% of damage taken from a champion is granted as mana, and spending mana restores 20% of the cost you regen mana based on taking damage, and you heal based on mana cast. Fiddlesticks doesn't have very high mana cost, and he doesn't spam his abilities very often. Champions that would use Catalyst items in general are champions like Ryze, Anivia, Ornn. Champions that want to be casting their abilities a ton, and their abilities cost a ton of mana. Fiddlesticks is not one of them. With the aura, nearby enemy champions take 15% more magic damage. You could achieve more damage. You could achieve the amount of damage that would potentially be reducing for yourself with probably just a blasting one. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't done the math, but like that's such a ridiculously like terrible amount for the amount of gold that you invest in it as Fiddlesticks. Another item to stay away from maybe is Zanya's, because a lot of the time in the early game, I think you should be looking to maximize your damage versus, again, pigeonholing yourself into like this utility role. And Zanya's kind of does that. With Zanya's, the build path is pretty awkward, as you could be sitting on like Fiendish Codex and then an Amp Tome for most of the early game. So let's say you have this stopwatch, you use the stopwatch, and then you can't sell that stopwatch. And then instead of this, you would have Oblivion Orb, for example. And then you're sitting on like all these components, and then you can upgrade to Seekers and then upgrade to Zanya's. And now, once you've built Zanya's, you're not going to have enough gold for a very long time, and you're not going to hit any meaningful breakpoints, because like you don't want to be building Amp Tomes at the time in the game in which you would be completing the Zanya's. You want to be getting like needlessly large rods, and you're not going to get those for at least like 2 full clears, if even that. after you complete the Zanyas. So it feels really bad in terms of the timing in which you can complete it as a first or second item. But just buying a one-time stopwatch for a single team fight can be really insane, because if you already have the lead, let's say it's in the early game and you have a needlessly a amp tome that would be building into Spellbinder, but then you have this one stopwatch for, say, third dragon or fourth dragon that's going to be game deciding, you could ult over and then use that one-time stopwatch and have huge impact in a fight, and then later just sell the stopwatch and then buy the Spellbinder and then buy other items, you know? Because you'd already be in a winning macro position from there. So in general, Zanya is kind of a bait item on this champion, and one that needs to be very calculated before you purchase it. And that's mostly it. Niche items that you could potentially consider would be something like Twin Shadows. Twin Shadows isn't terrible. Twin Shadows gives you 70 ability power, 7% movement speed, 10% CDR, and then it's active, which sends out these ghosts that slows the target. The slow is mostly going to be used, the slow is mostly going to be used for like scouting areas, because Fiddlesticks can't walk into the river mid to late game or he dies most of the time. So you could use this active and then see if the enemies are around. And then if they're sticking around, then that's when you could ult over and then catch them out. And the stats offered from Twin Shadows are also pretty good. So let's say you're sitting on Spellbinder, Oblivion Orb, and Twin Shadows. That's completely fine. You're spending all of your gold on ability power, which is what Fiddlesticks wanted to be doing anyways. So it's a pretty underrated item in my opinion. Because if you're completing this third item, you're going to get it at around 24, 28 minutes. And that's not bad versus sitting on, say, needlessly large rods or building into something like Void Staff. Especially with the utility it offers around objectives. So that item's pretty good. And Zeke's Convergence is also pretty underrated in my opinion, as you can bind it to an ally, and then whenever you ult, you then have this passive that is going to slow enemies, and then they're going to be taking extra magic damage, and then if your ally hits the enemies that you're slowing with this, they're also taking extra magic damage. Now, this item is only going to be giving you stats, and that's the best part of it, as I would only recommend you building it if you're running Aftershock for the most part. There could be niche situations where you could otherwise, but you're going to get the most value whenever you're running Aftershock, because it's going to synergize with the Aftershock percentage resistances increase, because it's offering you 60 armor and 30 magic resist. That in combination with Aftershock is going to give you a lot of stats whenever you go in, and then also with conditioning it's going to be giving you a lot of stats. The 250 mana and the 10% CDR isn't terrible if you're running Aftershock and you're playing that more utility role, given if it's proper in the team comp. So Zeke's Convergence is a really efficient item in that situation. It's also very, very cheap. So you could be sitting on Oblivion Orb Zeke's Convergence at 24 minutes and it'd be completely fine. It'd be, with Aftershock, it'd be very, very good. And then the utility with the one binded ally becomes pretty interesting as well. You would probably want to be binding with, say, an Irelia, a Wukong, a Kog'Maw, you know, the on-hit champions that you have, because that's how the item functions. You could read more about the item if you want to, but I figured I'd mention it. So yeah, that's a little bit about Fiddlesticks itemization. I don't think I covered absolutely everything in as much depth as I possibly could, but I hope that gives you pretty good general ideas. The main things that you need to focus on is just completing the jungle item first. As simple as that sounds, it's like, don't take any detours when completing this. It's like as simple as double full clear, recall into Blue Smite Fiendish Codex, and then full clear again into completing the item. Don't stop for like a Dark Seal or like multiple control wards or anything else. Like, I don't even know what else you could possibly go for. Don't get like Zanya's first item or something insane like that. Like, it's just so not necessary. And then even worse, don't go like Blue Smite into like a needlessly large rod. It just doesn't make any sense, man. Just stay on this easy path of the easy, but then also just the best path. Stalker's Blade, Swordpin Boots, probably Oblivion Orb into Spellbinder, into probably Deathcap, or Void Staff, or completing Morello's, or Twin Shadows, for example. So yeah, that's, I might talk a bit more about itemization in the upcoming sections, but that's most of what I wanted to cover. So now I'm going to go over how to mechanically clear the camps. Fiddlesticks has the unique mechanic in which you can drain 2 camps at the same time, and you have to stand in certain spots so that you don't de-aggro them, as it wouldn't make much sense if you were to aggro the camp, but then start dealing damage to it just for it to de-aggro because you were standing in the wrong spot, therefore wasting all the time that you were potentially trying to save. So let's do that, and at the end of this I will show you the fastest Fiddlesticks clear and then also break that down, but you need to practice the simple parts of it, which is just getting the camps in the right spot. So let's start with blue buff and wolves. With blue buff you could start either blue buff or wolves as soon as they spawn, but to pull the blue buff to wolves you want to auto attack it and then auto attack the wolves, and then you want to stand right next to this pebble. And then you're going to be in range of both the blue buff and the wolves without either one de-aggroing. So that position is pretty easy in my opinion compared to the other ones. The main part being, the wolves will follow you up to about here, and then the blue buff will follow you to about here. So if you're positioning on around the right of this pebble, basically in all the spots that I'm walking in here, then you're probably going to retain aggro from both the wolves and the blue. But if you happen to see the patience bar go lower on the wolves or the blue, you probably just want to be issuing commands about this way, which if you're playing as Fiddlesticks, you want to be doing this by already being in a position and then issuing a movement command and then using the stop to the stop command to kind of inch yourself forward without going all the way to where you've clicked, because while both jungle camps are on top of you, it's going to be very hard to click to move right on top of yourself without just issuing an auto attack command and not actually moving. So let's do the wolves into blue buff. This one's a bit harder, but is how you have to do the fastest full clear. So you want to auto attack the wolves and then drain the blue buff and then move backwards so that you don't lose the aggro of the blue or the wolves, and then back into this position to the right of this pebble. And then you can do both camps, and that's that. Now if you were to move again too far this way, the wolves will de-aggro, too far downwards and the blue will de-aggro. So just make sure that you're on this pretty simple line. You could this patch of grass is about as easy as it's going to get. The patch of grass and the pebble is where you want to be staying around. Anywhere too far up or too far back is going to de-aggro the blue or the wolves. So now let's look at the Gromp and the blue buff. Pretty easy. You pull the blue buff into the Gromp, and that's really it. What you need to pay attention to is, again, the max leash ranges for one or the other. So the blue buff can move to about this area, but then you would have to move back into it before it de-aggros. And then with the Gromp, this is about as far as the Gromp can go. You can gauge this by these 2 trees, but if you go anywhere past that, you're going to start de-aggroing it. So the blue and Gromp is pretty simple. Okay, so let's do the Raptors and red buff now. Whenever you're going to the red buff, you're probably going to be level 2, in which case you can use your E to aggro it, so that it will be walking towards you, and then you can auto attack the Raptors. And then you want to stand about on this line, in between the rocks and the tree, and then a little bit behind this rock formation with a little bit of grass in it, if that makes sense. And if you're ever de-aggroing the Raptors or the red, it's kind of the same deal. You want to try to scoot into them during, but this is the easiest spot that you can try to get on, where this rock meets that tree, and that's that. So then you can do both camps at once. Okay, so I'm going to be doing blue buff from red side and pulling it into wolves. I think this is significantly harder than doing blue and wolves on blue side, because the positioning and the timings are just a lot more unforgiving. So let's auto attack the blue buff and then move into wolves, auto attack the big wolf, move down to this exact spot, and then if you're losing patience from the wolves, you want to move a little bit to the left and then use the stop command, and get in a position about like this. You can play along this line, and so long that you can retain a position that you can pull the blue buff into consistently in practice tool, then that's the one that you should try to stick with. As you can also position, say, next to this tree, but doing it to the left has been the most consistent for me because I retain the aggro of the wolves even after their initial auto attacks, because once the wolves start auto attacking you, they can move and then that can mess up the aggro, especially if you're in the middle of a drain. So really practice this one. Practice it way more than the other ones. Okay, so let's do it as if we were starting wolves and then moving them into blue. So auto attack the wolf twice, move it into blue, use the drain, and then move back over here. And that's about the same spot as if we were pulling the blue into the wolves. And I'll talk about a little bit later why you would start wolves pulling them into blue versus starting the blue and pulling it into wolves. But that's how mechanically you can do it. And then after you would clear the wolves, you can move the blue buff into Gromp and then have the double drain as well. Alright, he wasn't so bad, just a couple ticks. On red side, the Raptors and red buff is about the same. The indicator is a bit easier as it's just this stone part of the ground, and it's really as simple as that. So let's pull the red buff into Raptors, auto attack it, auto attack the small Raptor, and then just stand right there. It's honestly easier than on blue side. So you can kind of have it as a trade-off where the blue side is harder for you to do on red side, and then the red side's easier on red side. Go figure. The red side of the jungle. Are you confused by the colors? Anyways, it's pretty easy. So this is the fastest fiddle clear I've done, and I'm going to be breaking down every single part of it and then letting you just watch the video as it is afterwards. If you're interested in that, you can obviously skip ahead. So to start out, starts off with 2 auto attacks onto the wolves, and then moving them upwards into the blue buff. The 2 auto attacks on the big wolf, very important, and then using the drain on both the blue and the wolves, and then you want to be moving over to the left so that you retain the aggro. If you're above about this line, then the wolves are going to de-aggro. So it's very important that you get to that same spot that we went over to keep the aggro from the wolves, and then continue to auto attack the wolves and then just simply drain them. There's nothing more to it other than not just randomly not auto attacking the wolf here. If you happen to have more patience, you could potentially kite upwards faster, but this final drain will kill the big wolf, and then you want to start kiting towards the Gromp and then use the E to aggro it, and then immediately you can smite and then W, as you'll be draining both, and then that's going to make it so that with your E into smite, it's going to make it so that your drain deals more damage. And then 2 auto attacks onto the Gromp, and then position about right here, and then use the drain. And then 1 more auto attack onto the Gromp, and then E, and then move away, and then 1 more auto attack, and then the W. And this is to do it in which the Gromp is dying right as its patience runs out. So if you don't want to maximize that, you are losing about a second, but you really don't have to do that unless you're trying to do it perfectly. So that would be something easy to skip out on, in which you could just stay on the Gromp in blue and then issue the auto attack commands. Moving into the red side, don't place your trinket and pink ward like that. So then into the red side, going to use the E on the red buff, auto attack the Raptors, and then position about right there. Auto attack the red buff once, and then issue the drain. And then it's just about auto attacking the red buff here. You don't have to auto attack the big Raptor. It's going to die to the drains themselves. So 2 more auto attacks onto the red buff, and then the E immediately into W. And then you want to be walking past the red buff. This part is really insane. And then cast the drain right as it comes up, And again, going to be killing the big raptor, pretty similar to Gromp, right as its patience is dying. And then move past the red buff into the golems, and right as you cast that E, you want to cast the W as red buff's coming into you so that it dies, and then you're able to get on top of the golems before they would de-aggro, as this is their max leash range. And then one auto attack onto the big golem, into W, and then 2 more auto attacks as you want to be moving to the right so that you're just simply closer to the river. And then after the 2 auto attacks, W, you don't need to spend the E on the small golems, and you really want to save it for these medium-sized golems. So you want to auto attack one, use the E, and then auto attack the other golem, and then use the W. That's going to make it so that both of them die to the drain. If you don't auto attack them, or if you don't hit them both with the E, then you're going to have to issue another auto attack, and that wastes time. And then you can fully drain these golems, or you could just tap your W and then issue a movement command to cancel it, and then the golems are going to die to Hunter's Talisman. And then you can move into Scuttle. You're going to be there way before it spawns, so long that you do things fast enough. And then as Scuttle is spawning, you want to buffer the E, and then cast Q, auto attack, and then smite W, and that's going to kill the Scuttle in one shot. And that's the full clear. And to do that, I mean, obviously practice it a lot, but the things that you really want to try to maximize is 1, the Gromp, and then 2 is the Raptors in red. That's where you're going to be saving the most amount of time. And even the simple parts of auto-attacking the wolves correctly into the blue buff is very, very important, as if you're missing out on those auto-attacks, then you have to stay for another auto after the drains, and you're just wasting time at that point. And even with the red, or not the red, with the golems, like I said, once you spawn the medium golems, you need to auto-attack both of them, and then, or you have to auto-attack the one, use the E, and then auto-attack the other one, and then use the drain. If you don't do those auto-attacks, they're not dying. So it's one of the smoothest, and then also just one of the funnest clears, in my opinion, in the game. Like, you could think of Fiddle as like a boring, like, basic champion, but it's like clearing the camps is really intense compared to like a Lee Sin. Like, I'm queuing, let's say I'm Lee Sin, I queue the camps. Alrighty, I'm auto-attacking. Auto-attack, auto-attack. I press Alt-W. Auto-attack, auto-attack. I press Alt-W again. Auto-attack, auto-attack. E. Auto-attack, auto-attack. Like, whatever, man. You don't even have to kite the camps on Lee Sin either. So these sort of maximizations will help you on all junglers, and Fiddlesticks, one of the more unique ones, and I really, really think it's cool. So here's the full clear at full speed and uncut. So I showed you how to do the fastest clear possible, and you should have that practiced and be able to do it as if you were a robot, right? And then even if you do it a little slower, it's not the end of the world. But in an actual game, how you're going to path obviously changes based on the enemy jungler that you're against. So if we're against no champions, then things become more just a lot simpler, right? How we would farm the jungle would be we would do blue and wolves at the same time, go into Gromp blue, finish those, raptors red, and then golems scuttle, the other scuttle, and then back to Gromp, wolves, raptors, golems, reset. That's your basic fundamental clear to get level 6 as fast as possible, and then also put yourself in a position to attack the scuttle that's going to respawn. You can also be back to gank top lane with blue smite and then also finish codex, and then be back in your blue side so that you're able to take the respawn Gromp, wolves, raptors, get this, golems, and then also be in a position to take dragon or gank mid lane or gank bot lane as you would be level 6 after that Gromp, or even after the top lane gank, for example. So with a path like that, it's mostly what you want to aim for, but the harder parts would come if the enemy jungler has anything to say about it, right? So let's take these three examples in Karthus, Rek'Sai, and Sejuani. Karthus being a opposition farming jungler, Rek'Sai being a ganking jungler, and then Sejuani just being a very slow clearing jungler, mostly playing around objectives. So starting off with Karthus, let's say we're on blue side and then Karthus is on red side. You would start the game in which Fiddlesticks would be wanting to start on his blue and wolves, and then Karthus would be wanting to start on his blue, and then Karthus' path would look something like blue, Gromp, wolves, raptors, red, golems, and then scuttle. And Karthus gets to scuttle about a little bit slower than Fiddlesticks can if you do the entire clear as fast as possible. But if you were starting red side, you could do something. If you wanted to interrupt the Karthus, you could start on your red and raptors, in which you would auto attack the red, auto attack the raptors, and then do them both. You would end up skipping the golems so that you could be topside a lot faster, and then you could do wolf's blue, blue Gromp, and then you would be in the top side way before Scuttle spawns, but you would only be level 3, and then you would be in a position to gank top lane or attack Karthus at his golems. Now if Karthus was low enough, then you'd put yourself in a position where if you attack him here, then he would have to concede, and then at the best case scenario you'd get a kill sometimes, but then you put yourself in a position to claim the scuttle every single time, and then you could do the scuttle on left side and then the scuttle on right side, golems, and then by the time you would get to these raptors, they'd most likely be respawned, for example. So that would be something that you could do against a farming jungler if you're trying to win against them. Now, if you were just trying to farm against them, giving the factors of every other lane when you factor them in, for some reason, if you weren't able to do all of this because of, say, the top lane matchup or even the mid lane matchup, then you would be completely fine just to farm against the Karthus altogether, because you're beating him in clear speed still. So you could do blue wolves, Gromp, raptors red, golems, scuttle, and then go back to your jungle, and then Gromp, wolves, raptors, golems, and then reset. And by the time you do that, Karthus would start blue, Gromp, wolves, raptors, red, golems, top scuttle, and then he could gank mid or gank top. And if he chooses to do either of those, he's going to be slowed down by a bit. And it would be the same if you were to gank mid or bot after you were to take scuttle. You need a reason to do either, and if you attempt them and it fails, then you put yourself behind in terms of pacing, because if you don't go back to base, buy, and then reset back onto the map, then everything is just slower for you. So if Karthus was to fail a gank top lane or mid lane, as he would be taking top scuttle and you would be taking bot scuttle and then resetting, if he was to, let's say, gank and then reset, by the time he would have been reset, you can be already into your blue side, in which case you could do wolves and then potentially move into his red side to take his raptors, as Karthus would be reset onto his Gromp and then be starting wolves. You could probably be on his raptors and then maybe even take golems and then go back to your blue side and then do Gromp. Maybe you're level 6 at that point, and then you could ult top lane, for example, or just go into your red side, then do raptors red and then maybe dragon. Especially if the Karthus is farming top side, he sees that his camps are gone, sees raptors is gone, sees golems are gone, and then tries to gank top lane, but more importantly shows top lane. By the time he would be there, you would be either finishing raptors or doing golems, and then you would be able to take the dragon, for example. So that's a couple of things that you can do against a farming jungler, and how you can look to play around them. But the most important things is never putting yourself in a position in which you're going to be clearing slower than them for no reason. And the only way that you do that is by going for ganks that aren't going to pan out or don't make any sense. And that comes just from player skill and then generally thinking about matchups, and mostly experience. So whenever you go for them, you are going to learn a bit whether the play is going to work or not, but in general, this is the type of path that you should stay on when playing against a farming jungler. So let's delete Karthus and then put in a Rek'Sai. So against a Rek'Sai, Rek'Sai could start red or he could start blue. The enemy team's going to tell you where he starts based on who comes to lane faster. So if his bot lane comes to lane slower, or if his top laner doesn't show early, then that's an easy way to tell where Rek'Sai is starting. If you have good enough champions, then you can go into Rek'Sai's red side level 1 and then place a ward on his red. It has to be your teammate's ward, unfortunately, because Fiddlesticks effigies, like if you just place it on his red and then he walks into it, it just dies. So you can't actually see if he's starting red unless, unless the player just is AFK right there, you place it and then the effigy dies and then he just stays there, then that's something. So there's lots of ways to get information of where he starts, even if you don't end up moving into his jungle level 1 and then getting the vision of it. So against Rek'Sai, Rek'Sai wants to do 3 camps into a side lane every single time. So if he's starting blue, he wants to do blue, Gromp, red, and then gank top. If he's starting red, he wants to do red, blue, Gromp, and then gank bot. He could also take a detour in which he does 1 camp, which is most likely going to be wolves. So he could do blue, Gromp, wolves, red, gank top. All of this can happen before Scuttle spawns. So against the Rek'Sai, you're not really at threat of the Rek'Sai invading you on the early clear, because if you were to do, let's say Rek'Sai starts red, if you were to start your blue wolves and then do Gromp, even if Rek'Sai tried to vertical, by the time he would show up in your blue side, you'd be finishing Gromp and be moving into your red side. So he'd be level 2, but you would already have cleared 2 camps and then probably be finishing Gromp at that point. And if you're ever afraid of the enemy jungler invading, like I showed in the fastest clear, we smite the Gromp initially, but if the enemy jungler could invade you early, which Rek'Sai isn't really a good example. A good example would be like a Kindred or something, where they can do the red buff and then move into your blue side early. If you're afraid of that, then just save your smite until the enemy gives you some information on. Save your smite on Gromp or on blue buff as you're doing both of them, if the enemy jungler could invade you after doing their first buff. So let's go back. Let's say that we're doing blue wolves. We do blue Gromp. Rek'Sai does his red and then moves into his red side. And then we would move into our red side and then be doing red plus raptors. By that time, Rek'Sai would be moving in again, still just level 2 when we already did 3 camps. So we could be level 3 at this point if he tried to invade at that time. So let's say he does red and then moves into wolves. By the time he's finishing wolves, we're about finishing red and raptors, and then he would move on to blue, and then we would be on golems. So there's never really any invade threat on the first rotation of things for Rek'Sai to attack you. Rather, you can ask yourself, how do I protect my lanes from the Rek'Sai early gank? Because that's the lamest part about Rek'Sai. And you would have to give up parts of your jungle clear to do so. Um, let's say if Rek'Sai was starting bot side and then wanted to gank top, considering matchups and whatnot, you have to ask yourself, like, how do you get top lane um, pre 3 minutes? Because if you do the full clear, Rek'Sai is going to be top lane before you, so you'd have to skip camps somewhere. You could do this by doing, say, Wolf's Blue Gromp and then just sitting in the top lane bush, but you'd be kind of early at that point. So I think your best bet would just be Red Raptors, Wolf's Blue, Gromp, and then into top side. But it really depends on matchups and really depends on if the Rek'Sai does that or not. Because if you, let's say you do Wolf's Blue, Gromp, and then you're sitting here, but then Rek'Sai did Blue, Gromp, Wolf's Red, and then, Jesus, and then Red, and then into top side, then you'd be sitting in the river for a very, very long time without, you'd be giving up the advantage that you could gain through farming for basically the coin flip of if Rek'Sai is going to show up top lane or not. And then it would be basically the same thing mirrored into the bot side. Whenever you're playing against these junglers, though, you can do something in which you can try to take their minor camps, the minor camps being golems, raptors, wolves, and gromp, by being on an opposite path of them, so that if they ever skip these camps, then you're able to attack them one way or another. So let's say that the Rek'Sai starts blue, and then we start blue wolves, blue gromp, raptors red, golems. Rek'Sai did blue gromp, red top lane. If your top laner survives that gank, it's a win, but then you're also going to be in a position to do scuttle into Rek'Sai's wolves, into recalling, and then coming back into your blue side. And then by that time, Rek'Sai would do scuttle. If he was to move into your blue side, you'd be able to contest him. And then if he ganks mid, then you could do gromp, wolves, raptors, golems, reset, and then be back onto the map to attack the neutral scuttle, or do raptors, golems, and then ult bot lane, for example, or golems, raptors, ult mid lane, or golems, raptors, do dragon, or blast cone, dragon, golems, raptors, blue, or wolves, blue, blue gromp, ult top lane, for example. So that's a farming, or that's a ganking jungler, and the type of things that you can try to do against them. Now, Sejuani is like a really, like any tank jungler like this. Any tank jungler like this is going to clear way slower than you in the early game. And Fiddlesticks' attack against that is that he clears faster, and you don't have to attack them for a very long time. So just double full clear, right? Reset, and then full clear again. And by the time you do that, the enemy Sejuani is going to be level 5 to your level 6. So then you can force the objective. So let's go through it step by step. How many times have I said this now? Blue wolves, blue gromp, raptors red, golems, scuttle, don't recall, wolves, gromp, raptors, golems, reset, gromp, blue wolves, raptors red, golems, dragon. And if Sejuani can test you, you're going to be level 6 to his level 5. And then if you can't do the dragon, then you can at least play for the neutral scuttle and then maybe have a play off that. If you can't do any of that, maybe you can level 6 gank a lane beforehand, because if the Sejuani's team can test you when Sejuani's level 5, 2 Fiddlesticks is level 6, you're going to win. You're going to have Blue Smite, Fiendish Codex. Sejuani's probably going to have Blue Smite Boots or Blue Smite Ruby Crystal, or Balmy Cinder Boots or Balmy Cinder Blue Red Smite. In which case you're still probably winning, because Sejuani just clears slower than Fiddlesticks. So she would probably start red, raptors, wolves, blue, gromp, scuttle, for example, or blue, gromp, wolves, red, scuttle, golems, raptors, and then maybe wolves, gromp, reset. I don't even know if a Sejuani can do that, but just tank junglers in general would maybe do something like this, because they clear so slow, they would have to skip camps like raptors, golems, because they would have to be at scuttle because by the time they'd be finishing their 4th camp on red buff, Scuttle would be spawning. So then they would have to go for it, or else you could just go for the Scuttle yourself. Even though you started on the opposite side of the map, you could do one Scuttle and then be there to attack the other one if Sejuani was to go for Raptors, Golems, and then do the Scuttle, for example, in which case you'd be hitting level 6 way before Sejuani. So I hope these little examples help and give you an idea how to play against the enemy jungler. And I would have to like coach a specific match to really give you better insights of how to play around lanes and whatnot. But I hope these couple examples can help you, especially once you start playing Fiddlesticks and then look back on it. Right now, I don't think it's going to be like the most impactful thing if you're starting with the baseline on Fiddlesticks, but probably come back to this part. Okay, I would be out of my mind if I didn't mention Nidalee. Nidalee, a champion that clears as fast as Fiddlesticks, but then also has the potential to invade you at multiple different steps. For example, let's say that we're Fiddlesticks on blue side, Nidalee's on red side. If Nidalee wanted to do red into your blue side, she could do that. She could have her Q and W level 2, and then as you would be doing the blue and wolves, then you would have to deal with her invading, as she could come through the river into this way to potentially find you on the blue and Gromp, and she could also come from above, as she could do red and then hop over the Baron wall, so that even if you had an effigy in the pixel bush here, then you would still have to deal with Nidalee coming into the blue side without you really having any say in it, because she would be coming from the Fog of War, so you'd really be guessing. But if the enemy top laner doesn't show or the bot lane doesn't show, even if you are looking for those signs, Nidalee has the advantage, because both the bot lane and the top lane could play in the Fog of War until Nidalee would be here, because that's how fast everything would happen. Now, let's say that Nidalee is starting blue. She would do blue Gromp Wolves, Raptors red. You would do blue. Blue Wolves. What am I missing here? You would do blue Wolves, Gromp, Raptors red, and then Golems. Now the weird thing with Nidalee is that she could do red and then move into the bot side. She would still be level 3, but she would have this option. So then if Nidalee's here, or even here, but most likely just here. Now if she's just right here, then you still have to deal with a Scuttle contest at a stage that you really just weren't expecting, and if Nidalee's lanes are winning, then this becomes what used to be a neutral into potentially a neutral negative, or just a loss entirely, depending on, you know, if your bot lane has priority, if mid lane has priority, and then the matchups in general. So you really have to be careful with that. Now let's say you both full clear. Let's say Nidalee didn't do this and instead did red golems into Scuttle. Nidalee can then gank top, or wait in your blue side and then start Gromp on spawn. So by the time that you would be walking back to your blue side for the double full clear after doing Scuttle, by the time you would show up, Nidalee could potentially be there, or she could be on your wolves at this, like, so she has the opportunity to steal your first respawn camp, regardless if you're there or not. So you have to deal with that potentially. And then if she doesn't do any of that, let's say she does Scuttle and then goes back to her jungle to do the double full clear as well, she's going to be able to reset and then go back to the bot side of the map. So if she's on red side and you're on blue side, then you want to reset to the top side of the map, because that's where your next camp is going to be respawning for the 3rd time in wolves. Nidalee is going to be resetting to the bot side because her first camp to respawn for the 3rd time is going to be Gromp, but she's going to be on the side of the map with the dragon, so you're just losing that dragon it's not going to be necessarily the end of the world, as you can then do your wolves into gold, or wolves into Gromp blue, and then by the time you'd be done with those, Nidalee would be finishing dragon. So if you have the heads up, then you could move into Nidalee's red side and then do a Raptors red or Raptors golems and then gank top lane being level 6. So avoiding Nidalee's potential invades is pretty easy so long that you're clearing fast enough and not messing up the mechanics of it. But notice how I didn't mention, like, well, you gank a lane here, because if you gank a lane once, let's run this simulation. Nidalee starts on blue, does blue Gromp, wolves red. You start blue, you start blue wolves, do blue Gromp, Raptors red, golems, scuttle. Okay, Nidalee is finishing golems and then moving into scuttle. So you finish scuttle, Nidalee finishes scuttles. Nidalee finishes scuttle a little bit slower, like 6 seconds slower. Not that big of a deal. And then if you as Fiddlesticks show bot lane, if you show bot lane and you go for a bot lane gank and it doesn't pan out, your entire blue side's gone now. So now you've lost wolves and you've lost Gromp, because you cannot gank bot lane and then reset and then go into your blue side. And you of course can't do bot lane gank into walking all the way back to your blue side and then your wolves and Gromp are gone. So you just can't do these things anymore without a heavy cost, because if you're resetting back onto the map into your blue side and these camps are gone, you're ruined. You can't go into the Nidalee's red side. It's not an option, because if you do, Nidalee could just go there and then you've lost. The lanes can respawn, you've lost. So you have to go to your Raptors, golems, and then coin flip bot lane again, or go for dragon. But you can't go for dragon most likely, because Nidalee, if let's say you ganked bot lane, let's go back to that timing. She does your respawned wolves into Gromp, into resetting, into Gromp wolves, Raptors, golems, reset, into dragon. So then your path would have been bot lane, it fails, recall up to your blue side. The blue side camps are gone, and by the time you would walk in here, Nidalee would probably be pretty close. And even if you take the Raptors, it's a very low price. Like, it's a very low prize. And if you take the Raptors and Nidalee sees it, she can just walk to dragon as well. So you can take the Raptors potentially, but the risk of doing so is incredibly, like, the variance is not going to be in your favor in most cases. So you would reset to the blue side, your Gromp is gone, your wolves are gone, you walk to Raptors, golems, and then Nidalee would be already finishing her full clear once again, and then be resetting to dragon. It takes you a very long time to do this dragon if you were to try to do it. So again, you're presenting with two probably very hard losing, high variance plays, being starting dragon, coin flipping bot, or doing Raptors if you were to put yourself in those positions. So don't put yourself in those positions. Just full clear against a champion like this. And if they invade you, then you can start winning as well. Because let's run this simulation, and then that's most of what I want to cover. So you start blue wolves, blue Gromp, Raptors red, and then Gromp, scuttle. You both do a double full clear, right? And then you reset into your blue side, and then that would be Nidalee's time to invade you. Any other time, it doesn't even matter, because if you're clearing the camps fast enough, she can't be there in time to actually attack at all. It's just not possible. If she somehow shows up on your red level 2, then it doesn't matter. Let's say best case scenario for Nidalee invade. You do blue wolves, Gromp, blue wolves, Gromp blue, and then you're doing Raptors red, and then Nidalee has done blue, Gromp, wolves into your red side, and then she's waiting right here. You can do a lot of things to obviously prevent this. You can have the effigy in this bush level 1. You can have a control ward in this bush. You can have a control ward right here. You could even have a control ward in Dragon Pit to spot her jumping over the wall. So at the very worst, as you would be pulling the red buff and raptors um, into the golems, the Nidalee would smite the red, and then you would be in a bad position. But there's so many ways to stop that, because you won't have a smite for this red buff if you smite the Gromp. So you could save the smite on Gromp potentially. And then if you have no point in Q, then you have no good defense against Nidalee right there. And then you have to dodge a spear as well. But like even let's say she smites the red and then hits a spear, you have to flash away, but then that's mostly it. You still get away after you flash away, so long that you're flashing towards this turret, right? So that's her best case scenario for the early invade. So let's say you both did a double full clear, and then Nidalee would choose to invade, so she'd be skipping going to her respawn Gromp, and instead would be resetting into your blue side to find you. She would jump over this wall and then be waiting, as you would be doing the Gromp, she would be waiting in this bush to throw the spear at you. At this point, if you have flash and then you have fear, you can still outplay her. So really, it's about not hanging yourself in a matchup like this. And yeah, just don't hang yourself by going for ganks. That's mostly what I want to say. Because if you do go for ganks pre-6 and take these huge detours in the early clear, you're giving up so much of your timing because Fiddlesticks clears so quickly, and then giving Nidalee opportunities to invade you. It's not that the champion can invade you whenever she wants, it's that if you give her the opportunities to, then she should, and that's that. So, yeah. So now I'm going to go over a couple of games, giving you like actual in-game examples of what can happen and how to play around it. Just for the sake of this one, really the important things are the jungle matchup, Fiddlesticks versus Vi. The lane matchups are really non-interactive matchups. For all things concerned, Xayah Rakan don't really touch Kai'Sa, Soraka, and Morgana and Nocturne are just wave clear. And then Darius versus Fiora is one of the more volatile matchups, but not one that you can affect very early. So against Vi, I know that she could invade at both the blue Gromp and then also around red. For her to invade red, though, would be a very expensive use of her time. So at the beginning of the game, as you can see, I have this ward. I use my pink ward below the blue side, and then I already spent my effigy in the top side of red, but they put a ward there, and if they do that, it's kind of like telling you that, hey, we're going to come to your red buff, and that's usually okay for Fiddlesticks because he clears so fast anyways. Because by the time that they want to try to end up in your red side, they have to get there and then they have to commit their time, so a lot of times they can end up in losses for them, even if they try to. So where Vi doesn't show on that control ward, I could still entertain the fact that she could attack from here, but again, that'd be a huge time sink because she would have had to done red and then walked all the way around through here, and then also avoided the river vision that control ward is providing as well. And she couldn't walk through Tribrush because my bot lane had warded it. The reason I say that it's hard to invade red side is because, again, you get here so quickly. You don't have smite, so the enemy can take your red buff, and even if they smite away your red buff, it's kind of okay. So as I'm here, this ward expires, telling the enemy that I'm in my red side and doing red and raptors. So if I wanted to, she could have done 3 camps in her blue side and then come and try to attack me on red, because it does take me a long time to finish the red buff. But even if she tries to take the red, that's completely fine. Let's say even if it was a faster clearing jungler, in which they would do 3 camps in their blue side and then try to invade, and would be in the bush above red buff, they would have to move forward to see red buff here, because red buff would be in the fog of war to them, because you pull it so far towards the Raptors. But the downside of that is that they would be in the fog of war where red buff usually is. So I'm playing around this, and then unfortunately red buff resets. So really the worst thing that you can do on Fiddlesticks is to yourself, in which you mess up the clear. So then I'm playing around Vi being in this bush, but then she comes around the other side. So it's kind of the worst case scenario for me. But as you can see, it's still pretty safe for Fiddlesticks. So I use the E, I get the slow, and if she doesn't flash on me, I don't have to flash away. So this isn't the end of the world for me, because I can give up the golems and the red buff and then move to the right hand side scuttle. Now this ruins Darius to a degree in which Vi can come around and gank him, but that's not our problem to deal with. That's really the laner's problem to deal with. So that's what I do. I concede the red buff because even if the red buff isn't that important for Fiddlesticks. The red buff also has magic resist, so on any AP jungler, it's going to take you the longest to do. So I don't want to stick around it to get attacked by Vi. I don't want to cause a 2v2 between me Nocturne versus Vi and Morgana. It's just not worth my time. Because if Vi takes the red buff, then she has to spend her time doing so. So then I can go into her red side because she's already shown that she's not done her red side camps by invading me at that time. This lucky bot lane gank really isn't important at all. Like if these things happen, obviously look for them and then try to attack them. In this case, I invade the golems because the enemy bot lane matchup is Kai'Sa Soraka. So even if a Soraka finds me here, she can't do anything about it. I can just drain the camps and walk away. I don't spend too much time there. I could have fully got the golems, but I didn't want any variance in which the Vi is reset or the Soraka runs me down with Qs with Kai'Sa. If Soraka's with Kai'Sa, the whole story changes. And then I go back into full clearing. So I clear my blue side camps, and then I suspect that my golems are taken. And the red buff is gone, which is completely fine. Whenever your red buff is gone too, you have to think like, when's the likely time that Vi took it? And then obviously calculate the respawn timer. But it will show you the respawn timer on the map, but just to have it in your head is way better. So now, even though Vi invaded me, I'm still recalling with 1,700 gold. So like it's not the end of the world so long that you don't die to the invade. And the mechanics of invades are always going to change based on the champion that could invade you and if they invade you and then how successful it is. But those are the steps that you should look to take whenever you do get invaded. And yeah, that's really all there is to this replay. Okay, so in this replay, I'm against Graves jungle, and Graves jungle is pretty similar to Kindred, and as you can see, I put my effigy right there. I don't put a control ward here, because I figured that Graves wouldn't even bother vertically. But against junglers that can go over the wall, Kindred, Graves, etc., I think it's worth to put a control ward in that bush in the blue side for this reason. So here's the best case scenario for Graves. He invades, he smites the blue, and now he has free reigns to take the Gromp, and then also just cut across mid lane, and then go to my red side. But let's see if like this is just the end all be all for the jungle path. So like this is worst case scenario for Fiddlesticks jungle. I suppose worst case would be you dying, but it's really impossible to die so long that you click in the opposite direction of the enemy. So he moves into my red side, so that leaves my Gromp up, and that's good. And then he can take my red buff. Again, losing our red buff is not the worst thing in the world, because it takes us so long to do anyways. And if he goes into my red side, he has to spend time on the red buff, or my Raptors, or gank bot lane. Bot lane's not actually gankable. And then it gives me free reigns to go into his red side because it's undefended. Now, if TF was to come, it'd be a next level play, and then you would be completely compromised, but you don't actually have to end up in this position if I were to smite the blue, or even the Gromp, and put a control ward in this bush pretty simply. So, let's play this out. So here I have to wait for the minions showing right here. You need to be very careful with things like this so that you don't just, give the enemy information. Okie doke, so then I take his raptors, Graves takes my raptors in red, then also goes for my golems. What Graves does too is that he leaves up the smaller parts of the camp, so that's going to make it so that they respawn slower for me. But this isn't the worst because I don't have to recall after clearing his camps. I fully clear them, and then I can take Scuttle. So if he was to do Raptors and then maybe skip the Golems and then attack this Scuttle, that would have been probably a way better play for him. And then skipping Scuttle, killing my mid laner, and then I'm going back into the jungle. And now Graves has a lot of time to clear the rest of his camps, as do I. And that's all that I can look to do here, is clear the camps. I even reset the wolves. Things are going pretty bad. It's a really, really bad game of Fiddlesticks, but it's not the end of the world for Fiddlesticks. So Graves has a level and a half lead on me. On the first recall, he recalls with Red Smite and 2 Longswords. I recall with Fiendish Codex. But you have to ask yourself, like, how is Graves going to spin this? So then I'm just waiting in my blue side for the camps, and then Graves spins his Red Smite Longswords on attacking mid lane and then taking Dragon. Now this is Graves' prize to take, but what it does is, again, make him spend a lot of time. In which case he could have been top lane doing Golems red and then invade me on blue buff. That would have been a way, way more successful play, in which Fiddlesticks just entirely loses. Because they can ult in with TF as well. So if the enemy attacks you once and then is successful, you are going to be on a downwards trend in which you are technically losing, but it is up to the enemy to make the correct steps. And then also potentially work with their team to do so, which, when's the last time you worked with your team and it worked out? Awesome, good talk. And then it's a bot lane difference. So whenever things go bad for you, like they did here in the blue side in the early game, the only thing you can do and should look to do is continue to farm your camps, or farm camps available. You might have to put yourself in compromised positions to do so, but you never have to be in this exact position so long that you spend that control word right there in the inventory, right here. Because by the time, you can also, with the full clear, I've shown you the fastest clear. If you auto attack the blue buff one more time, then it would be dead right here. And then I wouldn't even have to worry about smiting it, as he would invade. And then we could just concede Gromp from there. So that's that for that replay. Not incredibly useful, but is basically the steps you need to take to not compromise yourself further than you already could if things go as bad as possible in the early game. Yeah. This is an okay example if you're against a farming jungler. In this case, I'm Fiddlesticks to a Kha'Zix. Playing on red side, and a Kha'Zix normal path will just be a full clear matching yours. It's obviously better for the Kha'Zix to start on his blue buff, and then this Kha'Zix's path is a bit strange, as he would do the 3 camps into trying to attack bot lane. More so responding to what's happening bot lane in the first place. So regardless of that, my path on Fiddlesticks isn't going to change ever. I'm just going to full clear up to top side, because if Kha'Zix is to do the same but starting blue as he should, then we'll just trade scuttles, and then I can go back into a full clear. So then it ends up where I'm pretty late to this scuttle, and then I still end up getting it with smite, but it's not really the important part. Even if Kha'Zix gets that scuttle, then I can kind of just walk through mid lane, cast all my abilities on the mid laner, and then go to the right side scuttle because of my bot lane being pushed. But just in general, you can usually look to do that. And Kha'Zix could have an interesting path, and let's say if he started in the blue side, he could do the 3 camps in blue side, do Raptors red, and then come back to this scuttle, and then be here at the same timing that he was, despite all the things that happened in the early game. So you do have to account for things like that, potentially, given the specific jungle matchups. So now I choose to go back into a full clear, even though the bot lane wave would be pushing into my bot lane. Like, I'm always going to go back to this full clear, because if I spend any time, let's go back and look at this. If I spend any time like doing things other than this, then it is mostly just a waste of time. More importantly, like, I could even go to Kha'Zix's respawned Raptors, but the reason I don't even want to do that is because my Gromp's going to be spawning like right as I kill the scuttle, and I want to kill my own camps faster so that they respawn faster. If I do scuttle and then walk into the Raptors, I have to kill those Raptors, then I have to walk all the way back to the Gromp here. And that gives Kha'Zix a lot of time to play with, and that time is usually going to result in you losing Dragon, so long that the Kha'Zix pass properly, but you might as well be playing against the best idea of how the Kha'Zix can play rather than what actually happens most of the time. So I go back into another full clear before resetting, and then that's going to put me not only ahead in gold, but then ahead of XP to the Kha'Zix, and then puts me back in position where by the time I'm going to get back onto the map, my Gromp's going to be the next camp to respawn, and then my Wolves, and if the neutral scuttle was to spawn bot side, it would be even better for me. Where it spawns top side, that's somewhat unlucky, but if I reset to the dragon and then no one's around and my bot lane's in position, then I can just start that dragon and then go back into another full clear. So if you don't take any detours in the first clear like that, and the enemy jungler has no response for it, then you're going to put yourself on a really, really easy path to just claim all of the jungle camps and the dragon without the enemy really having a good response to it, especially if they're playing a farming jungler that goes for failed ganks or failed plays like that end up happening in this game. So in this case, the bot lane is pushed up, but I'm going to go to the dragon. Like, this isn't actually a gank. Even if I was to go over, I'm playing with an Ezreal Bard. The Bard is level 3 and the Ezreal's level 5. The Ezreal and Bard just want to farm early. So even though the Bard goes in, I don't care. Like, this is all in the Fog of War 2, so I find Kha'Zix on Dragon, and then I can just start the Dragon myself. I have my mid laner, and this bot lane fight is whatever. So the bot lane dies just because of Bard, but then I claim the Dragon, and then I'm back into a full clear, in which all of my camps are going to be respawning, and I'm going to be way ahead of golden XP, and I'm up on the neutral timing, in which we have the 1 dragon, so if we get the next dragon, we only need 2 for the soul, and that puts us at a very, very good position. And this is how you should look to approach playing against farming junglers, because just for example, I'm currently level 6 to Kha'Zix's level 4, so hopefully that helps. This is going to be a replay example of playing with Aftershock. A couple things I like to consider before I go into a match with or without Aftershock is the team comp that I'm playing with, and then the team comp that I'm playing against being the most obvious factors. So on the enemy team comp, they have Irelia, Echo, Brand, Jhin, and Yuumi. So if I was to ult onto Echo, Irelia, and Brand, usually it's the top side that you have to consider because they're going to be the ones that are dealing the most damage pretty early, and then the ones that have burst damage usually. And what Aftershock helps you do in a lot of cases is withstand that burst damage, and by doing so you can achieve more damage, because if you go in with something like Arcane Comet and then a build where you have all AP, you can find yourself instantly dying as you go in, and that's not very useful. So against champions that can burst you when you are to ult in, then it's important to just be able to survive longer than it would be to have more damage overall. Champions that would want to run away or kite, Aftershock loses a lot of value against, so champions like Ezreal, Anivia, things like this, it's better to have something like Arcane Comet because you're going to be running them down. Nimbus Cloak is going to be helping you in that situation too. Just things like that you need to try to consider. Aftershock also opens up your build path for items like Zeke's Herald. So in this case, I have Aphelios on my team, and Aphelios can benefit very, very easily from the Zeke's Herald if I were to build it. But that's about the only supportive item that I can really think of. If you were to go like something like Lock-in and Redemption, it kind of becomes overkill, but it could be okay. But getting a second item, Zeke's Herald, is very easy for Fiddlesticks because like you complete your jungle item, you complete Sorkfin boots, and then you're still sitting on a lot of durability because of let's see, because of Aftershock, Conditioning, and Overgrowth. Regardless of like the items that you have in the early game, you're still going to be having this 35 plus 80% of your bonus resistances, and then you still get damage from Aftershock per level, and then it's only on a 20-second cooldown. But with Conditioning plus Overgrowth, these two in combination with Aftershock is just so ridiculous for your durability as Fiddlesticks, and where Fiddlesticks converts the durability into effective damage because of his ult so easily, it just works out pretty well. So just play the replay. So into Echo, Echo has the option of doing his red buff into invading me. So I have the effigy right here, and then I have the pink ward way up here. So that if he were to invade me, then it just wouldn't work out. He wouldn't have any time. I'm going to speed up the clearing part, as I'm sure you've seen this enough. Just taking a look at the lanes, it wouldn't be successful for me to like do a level 3 top here. I'm also going to outpace Echo's clear by a lot, by like a whole lot. Echo, one of the slower clearing junglers. Echo is pretty similar to a champion like Sylas, where they're not supposed to be in the jungle, so they clear very, very slowly in most cases. And especially if you're playing an actual jungler like Fiddlesticks, a champion designed for the role that can clear as fast as he can, so long that you have the mechanics for it, then it becomes real apparent that the champion like Echo is kind of a fraud in the jungle. So here I have some time to play with. Since Echo is going to be in the top side, it's not important for me to like immediately do this scuttle. So since I have this like okay timing on the bot lane, I'll attempt it. It's not like it wasn't a clear gank, they were only about this far up. If the enemy is like past this line, then it's a pretty clear gank. If they're anywhere around here, then you're pretty much going to get their flash at the very least. It can be pretty lame for Fiddlesticks if the bot lane matchup makes it so that the enemy ADC can run cleanse, things like that. So pretty unsuccessful gank just based on how the bot lane is trying to play this out. And then I flash. I don't get the fear off, and it's just a disaster in the bot lane. So, reasons to not coin flip ganks. And kind of the same deal as bot lane. Like if mid lane is past here, they're dead. So Brand procs phase rush, and then with this lane state, I know that Zed needs to crash this. He doesn't need to, but he really wants to. Like he could get pushed in another wave, but it's better if I just spend my time doing this. It makes it so that I get a lot of XP as well. So I'm factoring this in because on your double full clear, if you get a wave like this, like you're going to be level 6 a lot sooner than you would otherwise. Okey-doke, there's really no threat of Echo. Like, hey man. Hopefully I can get... trying to get that tab score. Okay, so at this stage, I'm level 4 to Echo's level 3, and I have 31 CS to Echo's 16. Thoughts? And this was with a lot of time spent in the bot lane, like we just saw. So this is like the gap that Fiddlesticks creates against junglers if you just do this full clear against them. You're just clearing faster than them, and then if you don't recall, it's back into your jungle. Echo's exiting mid lane right side. There's no raptors for him to take, there's no golems, and the bot lane wave is going to be pushing towards my bot lane. So it's pretty much a total map win. With Brand locked in lane 2, since Brand doesn't have TP, this is pretty good for my Zed because the Brand needs to stay and push that wave out. Zed can take the next wave and then kind of just hold the next wave. So since I think we saw Echo in the bot side, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, we see Echo as I'm doing Gromp here. So that's why I look to go into his red side. Even though I'm going to be on the vision of this Scryers, Scuttle, my bad, then even if Brand's coming back, he can't be back. He can't be right here in time for me to, or by the time that I would finish the Raptors. He's about right here at the very most after his recall from pushing out the mid wave. Same with the top laner. The top laner would have to come from base and then have this huge detour down into the jungle. Now, I'm not going to stay for golems because that would just be complete overkill. But taking the Raptors, where I've already taken the mid lane wave XP as well, it just puts me in a really good position. So I choose to recall. I have 43 CS to Echo's 16. I'm level 5 to his level 3. He might be level 4 on golems, so you could say 43 to 20 CS, and then level 5 to 4, but it's like level 5 and like 60% to just a level 4 Echo. And now I have the option to reset into the bot side, in which I can do, say, Raptors or Golems, probably get level 6 off Golems, probably not off Raptors, or I could just reset to Dragon because this Blast Cone spawns around 5 minutes 30 seconds, and then I can take that Blast Cone over and do Dragon. So it just gives me complete reigns over the map. I get the Blue Smite and the Amp Tome. It's not worth to get like the Fiendish Codex and Hunter's Talisman. That'd be another option I could have. It's just not good. The Blue Smite's going to be giving you more damage than Fiendish Codex in almost every single situation. Okie dokie. So I do the golems. I'm level 6 at 6 minutes, and then I can look for a pretty bad ult here. Honestly, like, it doesn't even matter if this ult isn't successful because I'm level 6 so much quicker than Echo. Echo's probably level 4, level 5. Like, I can use an ult, waste it, and then go back to farming, still be getting ahead of the Echo, and then even if the ult is just for damage in this lane, it can be pretty good. So I immediately look for it just to spin the cooldown mostly. Since they're in a position, it's kind of just like icing on the cake. So let's go back. Talk a little bit about the mechanics of this. So whenever you know that you're going to be ulting in with low mana, which, I mean, I have 250, but here we are. So after the ult, I immediately spin the Q, and then I want to be, again, moving past them. Since the fear is a very low duration, this looks great. I'm using an E right here. Since the fear is a very low duration in the early game, you need to spend your E a bit like quicker after the initial fear from the ult itself, and then be moving past the enemy. So then I don't have mana for my W, so it's just important that I keep moving past them. That's really all it is. And they still die. Like, the Jhin still dies without the W. That's my main points are in the W right now. Thoughts? And then I get pretty lucky Scuttle RNG. But then Echo takes the Scuttle, that's completely fine. And Fiddle can do this, in which you aggro the dragon, and then you can W it where the Scuttle can't see you, because its vision is about right here, and you can stand right here, and then use your drain as the dragon is about right here. But if you have a bad teammate that just gives the information away to the enemy, then that really sucks. So if they do this, there's going to be a lot of time wasted, so I don't even bother with doing the dragon altogether, because the Lulu position like that. It could have done it, but I just didn't want to waste the time in this particular game. Okey-doke. And then since I have enough for my jungle item, I'm going to recall and then reset back to the top side of the map. I do this because if I was to clear those top side camps, it would just be a bit slower than if I took the jungle, or if I recalled, got the jungle item, and then reset to the top side, because if I do this, it gives me opportunity to gank top lane, to take Echo's red side camps, potentially gank mid lane, along with just doing my camps in the blue side and then moving into my red side and then waiting for, say, the golems and the red raptors to respawn. This is pretty interesting to know, even though this looks really basic. The same way that you're going to aggro the wolves and pull them into blue, level 1, you can do the same thing, but you don't have to do the 2 auto attacks once you're higher level, because you're just going to be killing the wolves anyways. So you can still drag them to the wolf like this, and you should look to do so when both are up, because again, you're just speeding up the clear beyond just doing it on your first clear. Okay, so things are getting strange in the top lane. Just a screenshot of this, it's like I'm never walking to this. I'd rather go into the Echo's red side, get the Raptor camp, and then see if I could like intercept the Brand coming back to mid lane, or just find the Echo in his jungle. And then since there's this control ward here, I'll just wait in the top lane because I can get the wave. And if I was to move in here, since my Zed is moving bot lane, I definitely don't want to move into the red side. It's just a losing play. I'm going to be in a 1v2, 1v3. So now I'm just waiting for Irelia to push this wave, and if she doesn't, I can still get the minion wave, and if she does, then it's a big dub. So let's look at the mechanics of this. Nothing's ever too crazy on Fiddlesticks. Again, you have to think about how the wall is going to push you out. So like here's the imaginary hitbox of the wall, and where I cast the ult, I cast it. Here's the imaginary wall. I cast the ult right here, so then it's going to push me out about right here. And then after you land, you want to use the Q and then move a little bit towards the enemy so that the minions are feared, so that the turret doesn't aggro them. It's very important whenever the minion wave's on the turret, especially in side lanes, because minions can just basically, if you make the enemy take a turret shot, you're just achieving like 150, 200, 300 more damage than if the minions were in the way. So if you fear the minions as well, it's just your best possible play. So I ult over, I use Q, and then immediately use E so that Irelia can't Q towards me, because remember that Q, the fear from the Q isn't that high because I don't have many points in it early. Another note, regardless if you're running Aftershock or Arcane Comet, after putting 3 points in W, just start maxing Q. There's really no value in putting extra points in your W after that, because having the higher fear duration is more important. Let me show you the scalings as well, because I think it makes pretty easy sense. The Q deals more damage initially, and then that's always going to be setting you up for more W damage versus the W just dealing more damage itself. So with more points in the Q, so if you ult over, the target's feared, and then I have 2 points in the Q here, so it's going to be dealing 14% of the target's current health plus 4 per 100. So super insane. It's also increasing the fear duration. So putting the points in Q is always going to be beating having extra points in this W past the 3 points in it. Because let's say if I had 4 points in the W here, I could have 60 extra damage on the W, but then also the 19% extra damage to the target's missing health versus the 14 to 16% of the target's current health. Because the lower you're getting them earlier, the W is going to be dealing more damage because of that, but if you don't get them low initially, which is a lot harder to do when you don't have a higher fear duration or the Q isn't dealing as much damage, then it's like, how do you get that W damage off actually? So in my opinion, maxing the Q after putting 3 points in the W is always the play, like always. And the E is always what you want to max last. If you look at this ability, it's just a super pathetic one. It's meant to be maxed last. There's really nothing to it. So I ult over, I Q. Since the Q duration's pretty low, I immediately silence the Irelia so that she can't Q onto me, therefore avoiding the turret damage. So she's going to take 2 turret shots, take the Aftershock damage, take the full ult damage, and that's that. And then again, I immediately recall. I'm not interested in doing the Rift Herald or pushing out the top wave. Since my bot lane camps are going to be respawning and I already took these topside camps, it's going to be in my best interest to, at the very least, reset bot. That gives me a lot of good options. I can reset bot, I can gank bot, I can do dragon, I can go back to my top side, and I can gank mid. Like, all the good options versus doing Rift Herald. Spending a lot of time on Rift Herald just to get like 3 turret plates or something. I'd be getting more value from, not only would I get the same if not more amount of gold through clearing my jungle camps, but I also get XP from them. and the XP is going to be way more valuable than just that turret plating gold. Fiddlesticks is also like not a supportive champion. Champions like Sejuani, Zac in the jungle can kind of get away with doing Rift Herald over camps themselves because giving their team more gold is probably going to net them more value in a lot of situations. So my blue side camps are going up, but I move into the river. Zed moves to the left side is very lame, but the bot lane wave is going to be pushing into my bot lane. So whenever your allies push in like 2 to 3 waves to the enemy bot lane, 2 to 3 waves are going to come back, and then those are the times you should look to gank. Again, if they're past like this line, then it's a pretty easy gank. Right here, it's not so much. But I'm really just trying to counter gank the Echo, because if I can get in here and then the Echo attacks from here, then I just kill all 3 of them. So here we are. Here comes the Echo. Let's slow this down. Okay, let's go back. My computer's dying. Lulu gets hit by the Jhin W. The Echo W is super short. Yuumi casts the ult. Lulu is CC'd, and then I use my E into moving into them. Another benefit of approach velocity, in situations in which you don't have your ult, you can still be a useful champion, because even if the enemy is slowed, you're not going to have enough movement speed towards them without approach velocity. Like, another good thing about approach velocity is that you don't have to commit something like smite to get movement speed. So I still have movement speed towards the Jhin if I want to use my Q onto him. But I end up using the Q onto Echo, as it's going to make it so that he might not kill Lulu, but he still ends up killing Lulu. And then I just auto attack him. It's really that's really it. Just run him down with the red buff. And then if they were to try to come across here, I could just ult over the wall. So I don't give them that option. This guy being weird, being real weird, Brand. So I don't even commit my ult with this. I just let Dragon kind of go to town. And then play this very, very slowly. Make the enemy real confused. Because I can earn this Dragon. I have a lot of time to play with, basically. So if they don't have a ward on this, then I get the Dragon, like I was talking before, without the enemy having any vision of me. Because if you're not standing on this, then they can't actually see you. Karthus can do things like this. I can't think of another jungler. But yeah, something that you can look to abuse with Fiddlesticks. Okey-doke, so we do the Dragon. Okey-doke, my team ends up dying, but I don't really care. It's just about getting the Dragon. And then I take a gamble here. Like, if they're trying to come around to attack me, then this ult would be successful. But they weren't. So, like, an ult is wasted, but since there's no objective up for a very long time, it's not so important. And then it's back to farming the camps. Okey-doke, let me look at this. Whatever. I'm assuming I'm up. I'm trying to see the scoreboard, but it's not happening. Okey-doke, so 12 minutes. I have conditioning now. A nice thing about Aftershock 2, it's like you're not giving up a lot of early damage compared to Arcane Comet in a lot of cases. You definitely are giving up early damage from not taking domination, but that's just not so important to me. The way this, like, as you can see, the way Fiddlesticks plays out, if you're playing him properly in any sense, domination becomes a very, very useless tree for him. So level 8 to level 10, and then if Echo and Brand invade me, Fiddlesticks has a lot of good counterplay to this. You can simply walk away from them and then press Q. It's a really insane play. And then they can't actually invade your jungle. Let's say he parallel convergence over this wall. I just flash, and then my Zed's there, and then my Nico is TP'd in. Okey-dokes, then I go top lane. I'm trying to find the Irelia. but Irelia just ends up killing Nico on her way back to lane. Okey-doke, so I'm kind of waiting for my Zed a little bit, and then I go in. I ult, I E, and then I Q, and it's kind of the same deal. If Irelia is silenced, then she can't Q to me and then Q away to like a minion, and that really, really ruins her whenever she's trying to attack the turret. So even though I have Aftershock, I still go the Oblivion Orb because I'm pretty fed on my team. Let me see if I can get a scoreboard here. Let's go in slow motion. There we go. Alrighty. So, top lane is down 20 CS, but still kind of winning. I'm 116 CS to 87, level 11 to level 8, or no, level 9. Mid lane is one level ahead. Bot lane is even, basically completely. So, it's basically me and Zed that are the fed ones. And with the Oblivion Orb, the enemy can't itemize any magic resist very easily. Only Irelia can. If Jhin or Brand or Echo builds it, then it's going to be very bad for them. So that's another easy reason to get Oblivion Orb. Kind of the same thing with Dark Seal. If I continue to beat the enemy, then I can upgrade this Dark Seal into Medjai's next recall, and then just be continuing to snowball from there. And I wouldn't even have to really all in the durability items with items such as like Zeke's, because I would be tanky enough with just the HP from something like Morello's, or just having more damage from an item like Needlessly or Spellbinder, for example. I mean, it's not even like important to mention in my head, but like the reason I don't gank bot there is because I don't have ult. It's a waste of time. All my camps are spawning. If let's say I take the detour, I do Gromp, I gank bot, Raptors are up, Wolves are up, and Gromp is up. And it's like, what was the point of ganking bot with no ult? Just to walk at the enemy and see what happens? And then if Echo ganks bot lane here, I have the option of doing Rift Herald, I have the option of ganking mid, and then I have the option of trying to take his red side camps if they're still up. Crime pays in the mid lane. Nobody knows that Fiddlesticks exist, and they love to see it. So then I immediately recall because Dragon's coming up. It does suck to spend ult at this stage, but ult before the Dragon comes up feels bad, but if Brand is dead for that long, then we kind of secure the Dragon anyways. And we don't have to start it immediately either. I get the Needlessly Large Rod. The Needlessly can become Spellbinder or Deathcap, both of which are good options. In this game, I would kind of be leaning more towards the Deathcap, but we'll see what I build. Spellbinder with Arcane Comet also becomes very useful into those same champions I was mentioning, like Ezreal and Nivea, where you need to chase them down. That extra movement speed offered from Spellbinder helps you do that in combination with Nimbus Cloak and Approach Velocity. Okey-doke. I do Golems, I go to Raptors, get this, I'm going to do Wolves, and then I'm going to do Gromp after that. Can you believe it? If your games are looking anything other than like this on Fiddlesticks, in which you're just constantly going camp to camp to camp to camp to camp, you're probably doing it wrong. And a lot of the problems that would be caused would be from like a player skill type of thing, or like an emotional play type of thing, which does suck and you do have to compensate for in solo queue. But if you really just play it out, going camp to camp to camp for a couple of games and then get a good feel for it without like really trusting your teammates, I think that's going to be best for you, because like your teammates are going to ping you a million times for not being there to fight everything, and it's just not Fiddlesticks' job, and it's really just not how the game should be played either, in most cases. To get a better understanding of this playstyle too, you could watch a player like Malice, Evelyn and Karthus main, that basically has the same playstyle in which Fiddlesticks needs to play, in which you're constantly farming your camps, and then you can look to counter the enemy in different ways. But once you surpass the enemy in golden XP, like Fiddlesticks commonly does, I'm probably level 13 to Echo's level 11 here, basically a 2-level lead the entire game. Then you can start doing other things on the map, such as counter gank. Like you can start skipping your camps for different things like counter ganks, objectives, and whatnot. So there's really nothing to do. So I recall complete Spellbinder. Another nice thing about Spellbinder is that it's so cheap and where you can snowball so quickly. Like having these items at 20 minutes is ridiculous. It's 266 AP, and then whenever I go in, I get the bonus resistances from Aftershock 2, along with conditioning and overgrowth. Like I have so much free stats along with so much like damage from my items. Okey-doke. So let's slow this part down, I suppose. So we're waiting for Echo here. We find him, polymorph into Fear, into Silence. CC's layered just sloppily enough, and then I use my ult onto the Jhin. If he doesn't back up, then he dies. So then he flashes away. So then I use the second E, and then I still have my Q. In situations like that would be closer, let's say if this tower wasn't up and Jhin was to try to attack me again, I could flash Q and then my Zed and Lulu would kill them for sure. You should be looking for things like that because it's not just about like if you can solo kill the enemy. You have a lot of CC in your kit in the Q and the E that you can set your team up for a lot of damage even when your abilities are down. Don't talk to me about that E. So even with the dragon coming up, I'm still going to go and do my other camps. At this stage in the game, especially if you have a lead, it's just give the red buff to your ally most of the time. Pretty simple. So Aphelios can finish that. Dragon, and if this fight was to be even close to closer, then it would be important that I responded to the fight versus staying on the dragon because I have ult and that's just going to win the fight overall. So after that I go into the enemy's jungle and just take all the camps that they have basically. I wait out here to see if anyone wants to come on to the tower and then I'll show you to play the game, you know? It's a Fiddlesticks difference. You ult over the wall. And that guy dies, and it's an ult in which it doesn't matter that it's on cooldown after this because I'm going back to farming, and the game's really, really solved from here. The enemy just has like no good options because I'm so far ahead. And I got that far ahead from farming, and then just a couple, like one counter gank, and then really just punishing the enemy solo lanes. Even though my top laner was somewhat losing in the early game, because I was there to attack the Irelia who was like overdoing it, that's one way to get an advantage. That's not going to be a consistent way to get it in your games, but Fiddlesticks can really abuse those with his ult because when you can spend your ult when the objective's down, because I was getting the early dragons, then it doesn't matter that I spend the ult on the solo laners because the enemy can't counter with anything else. They can't take dragon, it's down. If they try to take Rift Herald, you can kind of just walk at them and stare at them and they can't actually do it in most cases. Okey-doke, so resetting onto the map. Our team does Baron. We basically wait for everyone to reset and then get on the waves. Spoiler. This is also a position I like to take in which I have my allies be forward. It's not important for you to be standing on them most of the time. It's better for me to be like in the fog of war, so like the enemy can't see like anything anything in the yellow. You know, they just can't see it. So if I'm standing anywhere around here, they have to respect that if they were to go on my my Aphelios in the Lulu, or my Nico in the Lulu. So whenever the Irelia dives in, that's when I'll channel my ult. And then let's watch this one in slow motion. So I ult in, I use the Q into the E, and then the Brand gets away from that. And then I flash on top of the Brand Yumi, and then Brand almost instantly dies. Level, what, 12, 13 mid laner to level 16 jungler. You love to see it. And that's the benefit of having a lot of AP, is that you're going to overkill champions by a lot. And if they can't turn onto you, then it's completely fine. You really quickly solve the game, regardless of your ally's impact, with an absorbent amount of ability power, which I'm getting from Spellbinder, Marilla, Nomicon, and Medjai's in this case. So this was an example of Fiddlesticks with Aftershock. Even though I'm running Aftershock and didn't even build Zeke's because I was winning so hard early, as you can see, the damage is going to be there, and the durability becomes really obnoxious too whenever you're ulting in and the enemy just simply can't, like, the durability with conditioning overgrowth, even when you're overkilling the enemy, if they wanted to turn on to you, you still have this, like, you have these stats to fall back on, and in combination with having levels over the enemy, at the end of that game, I don't even know what it was, like probably level 16 to probably like 13 or 12 of the Echo. But then also I'm so high level over the other enemy champions, it just becomes too much for them to deal with, and you simply overpower them through farming, and that's really it. Just farm. Just farm. Alrighty, next game is going to be a game with Arcane Comment. Alrighty, in this replay I'm going to be using Arcane Comet and then giving you hopefully some good examples of like how the benefits of it. So into the enemy team comp, like I mentioned in the previous one, Arcane Comet gains a lot of value whenever the enemy has a lot of like high range champions, and Lulu, Ziggs, and Aphelios are the main ones I'm concerned with here, as I need to be able to kill these champions. I can do so pretty easily so long that I can stay on top of them. And the benefit of the Arcane Comet page is that you get not only Nimbus Cloak, but approach velocity, along with more damage. So with Arcane Comet, damaging a champion with an ability hurls a comet at their location, and then if Arcane Comet is on cooldown, whenever you deal damage to the enemy with abilities, then you're going to reduce that cooldown. So if you're in a, let's say you just ult one target, you're going to be getting 2 Arcane Comet procs off. If you're ulting multiple targets, you're probably getting 3, and then if you're ulting the entire enemy team, you're definitely getting 4 Arcane Comet procs off, and this damage is going to be scaling on your level, your ability power, and then the cooldown is also going to go down per level. So later in the game, the better it becomes, which is just perfect for Fiddlesticks. It's also not like, you're not losing out on anything from, say, like the Domination Tree, because it's going to be adding extra damage in the first part of your rotation, which is the most important part to have more damage in. Maybe Electrocute could give you a little more damage, but it's just not required. And the benefits of the rest of the sorcery tree is also going to give you so much more scaling. So the rest of the sorcery tree is going to be absolute focus in Gathering Storm, both of which are going to give you a lot of ability power, like a lot. In this case, I have Gathering Storm because the enemy team comp is Shin, Nunu, Ziggs, Aphelios, and Lulu. And my team comp is Mordekaiser, Heimerdinger, Misfortune, and Set. If you have 3 AP champions on your team, you're going to have a pretty bad time as Fiddlesticks, so you might as well be playing for like the latest stages of the game as possible, because you need to be playing for like your Void Staff timing as like a 4th item, which feels pretty bad, but it's not impossible to do, and really it's just kind of what you have to aim for, because there's no substitutes for it basically if the draft is just too bad. And then the secondary runes is going to be Magical Footwear and Approach Velocity. Magical Footwear helping us get more movement speed with the plus 10 with it, along with saving 300 gold, which is going to make the build path into Swordpin boots just faster, makes your mid-game spike a lot better, as you can be level 7, level 8 with Swordpin boots and Runic Echoes pretty consistently. And with Approach Velocity, It was recently changed. You gain 7.5% movement speed, 7.5% movement speed towards nearby enemy champions that are movement impaired. This bonus is increased to 15% movement speed for any enemy champions that you impair. So every time you ult over and get a fear off, you're going to have more movement speed towards that target. Whenever you use your E, you're going to have more movement speed towards that target. Whenever you blue smite someone, you're going to have more movement speed not only from Nimbus Cloak, but from approach velocity as well. And if anyone on your team happens to slow the enemy and all your abilities are down, you could still get more movement speed towards them. And that movement speed is going to be very, very important, again, towards high range targets such as Ziggs, Aphelios, and Lulu. Particularly a champion like Lulu, where she provides so much pill for the Aphelios. Let's say you ult over, and then Aphelios, or Lulu uses her ult and then Q. So like, let's say you get knocked up, and then you get slowed. You could still run them down. You could still run them down with Nimbus Cloak and approach velocity. And you're really not giving up anything that important in the other runes. So, those are the runes that I'm running in this game, and kind of the benefit of them. Another benefit of it is that with the build path of building full AP on Fiddlesticks is it takes a lot of variance out of like what your team has to do at all. Domination might be better if everyone's on an even playing field and you want to provide more for your team versus for yourself. But that never happens in solo queue, so that sucks, and never will. So with Arcane Comet and a full AP build path, it makes it so that you could literally 1v5 ult over the wall and kill all 5 enemy champions. Maybe not the Nunu Shin, but that barely matters. If my Misfortune auto-attacks the Nunu Shin about 3 times after my full duration ult and W, then they probably die. So like, it makes things a lot easier for your allies in that sense, with basically like a compensation of their skill. So in this game, I'm against Nunu. I'm not too worried about a Nunu invade. It would be kind of annoying if Nunu was to vertical and do my red after his blue, but it's not the end of the world if he does that. So my control word and effigy becomes pretty useless in the early game. If Nunu was to invade my blue side too, that'd be kind of strange. Skip ahead a little. Since it's Nunu, I don't have to do anything when starting red Raptors. I don't have to avoid Nunu basically. I'm going to be out clearing him and his invades are pretty weak. If the enemy jungler doesn't show in your blue side by about like 205, then I think you're free to smite the Gromp just to have a faster clear. So red Raptors, no reason to detour to mid lane or anything. I'm keeping watch on top lane as he died like level 1, so it becomes a high variance play. Nunu shows mid lane and then exits right side mid lane, so it's very, very important to me to do. So with Tab, I saw that he has 17 CS, and that shows me that he's done has done 4 camps. With this gank, it's not something you should really look for, but I know I have a lot of time to play with here because Nunu again has exited right side of mid lane, so I know that I can try to attack the Shin and then do Scuttle Crab and still be back in my bot side by the time my Gromp would respawn. Alrighty, really helped that one. Really nice to ever get lane XP because it's going to make your level 6 so much faster. So with a weird successful gank in the top lane, not something that's going to happen consistently, obviously. But I lose nothing for going for it, basically. Nunu's not going to go on my blue side and take the wolves, and if he does, good on him. But where Nunu shows in the bot lane, it's not going to happen. Since my mid lane dies, I adapt to it because with this gank, if Ziggs recalls anywhere like right here, he dies for sure. And then even if he's recalled like right here, I can flash and probably kill him because he was so low. And then if I don't end up killing him, I can get this minion wave and then go back into my blue side for my double full clear. So this isn't like a coin flip gank, it's just like a good reactionary one in which I have a lot of options. Okey-doke. Let's break down the hardcore mechanics of this one. So again, we see Ziggs with very, very low HP. Okey-doke. So I flash and then use my E behind him because Ziggs should be running away. And then the E ends up landing. All of this looks great, huh? And then I Q, and then I auto attack. There's no reason for the W. If Ziggs were to flash or something, then the auto attack would follow him. But he could get away from the W. And then I want to hold the wave right here so that it's frozen for my mid laner. Never ever want to push that wave. So then it's back into my double full clear. This is like the best case scenario for Fiddlesticks ever. Like ever. In which you get a kill on both solo lanes and you get solo lane you get XP from the minions. The only thing that could have went better is if I got like both scuttles somehow. So 5 minutes in, I'm level 6, and because of this, I have a lot of time to play with. Nunu is ganked top lane. Nunu's not going to go into my red side to take golems. It's like a very low EV play for him. So if he was to do that, I could still just respond with Raptors. But I'm going to gank mid lane here because I'm level 6 so quickly, and I just want to spend the ult because the ult cooldown isn't that important, and it's better to use it and then get some value out of it, even if I'm not killing Ziggs, to have it on cooldown so that it can be up against, because the more ults you have in the game, probably just the more value you're getting. Okey-doke. So I'm waiting for Ziggs to move up, but then Ziggs ends up warding over the wall. I'm assuming there was a ward either right here or maybe right here. But where Ziggs does that, and then Nunu's gank top, then we can do Dragon instead. So, even though that ult doesn't pan out, I still have backup plays afterwards. Because Nunu can't go from top lane into being in position for this dragon. Just doesn't have time. And then I go in this bush and recall. I start the recall because if the enemy bot lane doesn't walk up, then we don't have a play. But Set can force things, so it makes it where I can just walk into them. So I don't even end up using the ult, I just use the E and still get Aphelios' flash. Nunu goes for my Raptors, so I'm going to do Scuttle, and then I have the option to go into his red side or dive bot lane. Where the bot lane doesn't stay, I just recall. There's no reason of sticking around for nothing. And then a perfect recall into the jungle item. If you can ever just recall into a full jungle item, obviously it's best. Let's say if I didn't do the Scuttle and recalled, it would have been very lower value comparatively because there's just no reason for me to reset at that time and then try to get back onto the map. When there's no objectives up and then there's no ganks to be had, and when all of my camps are going to be respawning, just better that I get back to the camps than anything else. Okie doke. So at this stage, I'm level 6 to Nunu's level 6. I'm probably a little bit ahead in XP, probably like 30% ahead, and then 48 CS to 39. You're not really ever racing a Nunu jungle in terms of like your value. So with top lane's up 10 CS. With bot lane, things are even as they always are, and then mid lane's pretty even as well. So it's really just about like how ahead I am myself compared to the rest of the map than it would be just against the Nunu. And again, going back to my camps is going to be the best play because I'm just going to get further ahead of everyone. Because let's say if I was to skip these camps, go into gank bot lane, like the Wolves would be up, the Raptors would be up, the red buff would be up, the Golems would be up, and like why would I skip these? Like why? You just get too much XP and gold for doing them versus if I was to gank bot lane when the bot lane wave is pushing away towards the enemy. So if my bot lane dies, it's kind of like to my advantage in which I can go into the enemy blue side or do Rift Herald. Because a Rift Herald, like at this time, where I'm this far ahead, I can do fast enough and then use just for the plates mid or top lane. Doesn't even really matter if my laners get the gold either. Okey-doke, so both my solo laners die, along with my bot lane dying again. So it's kind of the worst case scenario here, but where I already cleared my blue side, there's no camps for Nunu to take, and then I can go into the enemy blue side and then do their camps instead. So it's not terrible for me. And again, where if I get enough AP, I can literally just 1v9 in which I ult into the entire enemy team and then kill them all with the ult by myself. So then after doing the enemy blue side, I could look to gank mid, I can go back to my red side, clear those camps, reset, then be back into my blue side as the camps would be respawning. Doke. Another nice part of approach velocity here. Let's watch this play out. So I E, I have more movement speed towards him. And even though he's trying to walk away, Ziggs has one of the lowest movement speeds in the game. So my second E comes up, I get more movement speed towards him. I blue smite, Q, and then walk into him, and then use the W. Interesting flash. Okey-doke, and then it's a do-si-do into the jungle. Love to see it. So I'm back in my blue side, a successful gank, and then it's back to clear my jungle. You notice a common trend here? Like if you can get 2 full clears off before each reset, you're probably winning on Fiddlesticks almost every single time. This is also in alignment with the dragon respawn timer, so by the time I reset, I can be back to the bot side and in position to fight for the dragon. If I wanted to, I could also stay on the map and then fight for the dragon. Since my bot lane dies, I'm going to stay on the top side of the map instead of resetting, because if I go to this dragon, if I try to reset or even walk to the dragon's going to be gone by the time I would get there. So there's no value in doing that. So I'm just going to stay on the top side of the map. And then the options I have is gank top, use Rift Herald top, or farm the enemy blue side camps. So I've cleared the enemy blue side twice now. Even if Nunu shows up, it really doesn't matter. I kind of just walk away. There's no threat to it. I get Shin ult on the Ziggs, oddly enough. They try to chase me down. And that's that. So I spend a lot of their time there. Like, it all happened pretty fast because this video is at faster speed, but like, the Nunu comes from Dragon into Wolves. He probably chases me around here. I go to mid lane, I get the Shin ult. And then I move back into my red side. Nunu and Lulu are there, so this compromises bot lane where Aphelios can't farm anymore. And then here I am in the top lane. Since they have given up on this because Ziggs would have had to reset, Nunu doesn't really have anything to do. And then if Lulu comes top lane, that's strictly unlucky. But now I just have a gank onto top lane. And then even if Nunu's here, let's see how it plays out. Not even close. Alright, so let's watch this in slow motion. So I ult, I Q, and then I save the E for a little bit. The E is mostly just for the damage there. Whenever you're playing into tanks, the silence might not be as important, and rather the slow and the extra damage that it deals might be more impactful. So Shin almost instantly dies, and then we get the Nunu flash. And then I can use the Rift Herald, and then reset, and everything's just great for me. Just having a great time here. Because now I can go back into the bot side, and then full clear upwards again. And that's that. As my ult's going to be on cooldown, there's no need for me to do anything, and there's no objective up, so there's just nothing for me to do. And look at my team right now. Like, everyone's losing but me, and that's completely fine. The Misfortune build is like the worst things you can build on Misfortune. The Heimerdinger is significantly behind the Ziggs because Ziggs is a hyper carry compared to the Heimerdinger. And my top laner has died 6 times, but everything's just fine. Everything's just fine. It's okay. There's no threat on that Scuttle Crab, so I feel like it's okay. From what I see, the Heimerdinger is instantly dead, so there's no reason to respond to that. If you ever, like let's say, okay, so at normal speed, let's say that you see this happening and you walk to it, but it's a bad time. Like, you need to be looking at your lanes like I am. Like, I see this is already going to happen before I can get there. And since I don't have ult, Like nothing, there's no play here for a Fiddlesticks because the champion is just so simple. You have ult, you have a play, you don't. You probably, like 90% of the time, you don't actually have a play. So if I was to walk to this, I'd be spending probably about 40 seconds in which I walk there, nothing happens, the fight like kind of dissipates, we go back into our jungle, and then by the time I want to be farming the blue and Gromp, they're like sieging the mid lane or something. You just can end up spending so much time for nothing. But you should be looking at your lanes like this. But like, let's say if I chose to walk there, it'd be an incredible waste of time. But you have to train that, and that comes from judgment and experience from every game, every match of League of Legends you've ever played. It's going to build up towards that. So don't be like absolutely brutal on yourself whenever you do walk to something stupid. Just notice it and then try to correct it across time. And by across time, I mean across like years. Not like 2 games. Like, wow, I'm better now. Like, nah, we're here forever. We're playing League forever. Just kind of tickle the shin. Cleared my camps. I'm clearing them. Nunu shows bot lane for the 4,000th time. So can you guess where I'm going? That's right, into the enemy blue side. I'm going to get his camps for like, what, the 3rd, 4th time this game. I waited out to see if Shin is like coming to find me. I pulled a blue into the Fog of War instead of doing the Gromp and blue at the same time. Since Shin was moving like that, I'd rather just be unseen than have him like interrupt things. So that's why I pulled these into the wolves. I'm kind of doing the same thing, which I don't want Shin to find me here. I end up doing all the camps slower because of it, but if Shin finds me, it's just a huge waste of my time. If Shin does Rift Herald as well, I don't really care. So Shin does Rift Herald and dies for it. It's worth for our team every single time. I get mid lane flash, and then I can recall into needlessly into again just another full clear. But since Zigzaag's my recall and Dragon's going to be spawning, I can do red buff into full clear or red buff into reset. So even though I don't have ult, I tell my team like it's time for you guys to provide for me. If we can stall this out long enough for my ult, we can win. And since we have Mordekaiser ults the Nunu, and then I can get the dragon. You'll love to see it. No ult required. Look at this. Look at this crazy guy, this crazy Mordekaiser pressing R. What a guy. Mordekaiser presses R, what a genius. And it's a done deal, and then it's back into the full clear. I kind of try to play with them here because my ult's coming up, but there's not any real minigame for them to play into. So then it's back into the full clear. Because if I was to reset here, it's like there's nothing to reset back to. There's no Baron. There's no dragon, and all the waves are coming into my laners, so there's nothing to really do, nothing consistent to do. But farming the camps is always going to be there, and it's always going to be a very, very good option for you because it's going to be giving you more golden XP every single time for Fiddlesticks, every single time. Okay, so looking at the entire map, top lane is now ahead. I'm very far ahead of the Nunu, 13 to level 10, 166 CS to 91. The mid lane's about even. Enemy mid laner's still ahead. The bot lane is slightly behind, and well, yeah, the bot lane's pretty behind. And then mid lane's still kind of losing. So it's really just me and slightly the top lane, but at Mordekaiser a level ahead, it might as well be even anyways. So I'm in a position to 1v9, and then I choose to get Banshees because the enemy team has very good ways to interrupt me with their CC, but then also they have very easy magic damage because if I ult over into a Ziggs minefield and then Ziggs Qs and Ws, I'm dead. I'm dead every single time. So with Banshee's Veil, it's going to help me absorb one ability along with having the magic resist to deal with Ziggs. So it eliminates a lot of variance, but then also gives me a lot of room to play with in team fights. It also helps against things like Lulu's Polymorph and her ult knockup whenever I would ult into the enemy team. So with this stage of the game, nothing's really going to happen for a long time. Like nothing meaningful. Like Ziggs pushes out this wave, I ult him, he dies because he's solo. Mordekaiser's farming top, my bot lane's walking around the jungle. The entire enemy team's randomly there, coming from mid lane, so I die. So this is bad movement for me, that gets punished. But then the entire enemy team now has to deal with my entire enemy team. But Aphelios was made with 200 years of experience and kills everyone because of red-white and a bunch of melee champions walking into him. So now the game is delayed by a lot. Aphelios gets a quadra kill, but with no objective up, it's not the end of the world for us. The enemy's Rift Heralding mid, they're trying to siege. So this gives me an opportunity. A really good thing that you can abuse in solo queue for Fiddlesticks is whenever the enemy has melee champions, the melee champions will kill their ally ranged champions almost every single time. Like, because melee champions usually have to go into the enemy and ranged champions usually want to kite away from the enemy. So let's say like here they have Aphelios Lulu and then they have Shin Nunu. Aphelios Lulu Ziggs with Shin Nunu. Shin Nunu like want to go in. Aphelios Lulu and Ziggs want to kite everything. So if the Shin Nunu like overcommit and it's basically going to put the enemy range champions like off sides all the time, in which you can ult over a wall and then kill them all because of it. Okie doke. The Banshee's Veil like blocks the Q damage, I suppose. Is it an approach velocity difference or what? Q. Use the W after the set E, you'll love to see it. And all of this happens because they're sieging mid lane like they are. Aphelios is dead as they're like Rift Heralding mid, and then since they're fighting mid like this, they're too far up the lane. They're way too far up the lane. And then since I'm behind them as Fiddlesticks, it's just a loss. My team barely has to do anything here. It's like Misfortune Mordekaiser right-clicking Nunu. And then the enemy range champions, since they were too far forward, I now have the distance on them to run them down. And then where we do that, we get Baron because of it. Two. Silence into Q, into walking W. If the Aphelios QSSs, whenever the enemy ADC QSSs, you have to concede until your Q and E is back up. If you keep walking into them, you're just walking into auto attacks when you only have your W and auto attacks basically, and they win. They win that because they can just simply walk away from you and still be auto attacking you because they have higher range than your W. And that's like every ADC in the game. So it's the same thing, even entering mid game here, you still need to be farming. Always need to be farming. There's never a stage in the game past like level 18 when you're full build that farming doesn't matter on Fiddlesticks. So in the mid game, a lot of plays are going to happen like random things kind of like this that you have to react to. And you have to skip camps for them, but you need to be looking to go back to the camps. And there's going to be a lot of situations in which your team like kills you and then you can't farm and then you fall behind because of it and then you lose the game because of it. But so long that you don't take bad fights, then that's not going to happen as often, but good luck. I should have used my W there. I was so slowed by the Nunu thing that I was really surprised by it. And now I'm in a very awkward situation here. I missed the E. My life's feeling pretty bad here. Dodge the Q. And now I'm just kind of existing as Fiddlesticks. So with no ult, I have to concede that dragon. The enemy also has a lot of magic resist at this stage, so it's the point in the game where if you don't have like Deathcap, Spellbinder, or Void Staff with 3 AP champions, then you're just going to be feeling really, really bad because the enemy can sit on like one magic resist item and you don't have much say in it. So I recall for Needlessly Large Rod and then Control Ward and back into the red side. I did my Raptors into Fighting Dragon into Golems Wolves, so they're going to respawn in that order. So I can do Golems and then kind of just sit on my top laner or sit mid lane. And at the mid game too, it's also very nice that Fiddlesticks FSGs are like so efficient in the duration of the vision that they offered. So even if all my camps are down, I can still be moving around my own jungle and then putting vision in my jungle to see if the enemy's coming in, and then if the enemy does come into our jungle, then we can have a play by ulting onto them, for example. Whenever the enemy is doing Baron, you can put an effigy right here, and even if they have vision, if you're over here and you ult over, then they just have like no signal that you're actually ulting over the wall. And in general, just this wall is going to be easier for you to steal Baron on most junglers. It's less likely that the Tri-Brush is warded. And then also potentially just gives you a better angle because you get more distance onto the, like let's say the entire enemy team's right here. Gives you more distance onto them if you were to ult and then be positioned right here versus ulting over the wall and then being right here. Very patient with this. I'm just trying to steal the Baron and then get any kills that I can. So then I get very, 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 very lucky with that steal. And then just try to get as much damage off as possible. Do you want to see it again? Because I do. Imagine stealing Baron from Nunu. You'll love to see it. But he's feared, so he can't do his Q combo. And I deal a lot of damage after I ult over. Feared, love to see it. Just immediate smite. And then it's not so much about surviving there. It's better to die a hero. And then the game's stalled out for my team, even though my team was losing early. So let's just skip ahead to the respawn. My team is pushing mid lane. They all end up dying mid lane as I'm doing wolves. And then my only option really is to do my camps and then reset. I now have Spellbinder. The enemy's going to take our mid inhib. It's the price you have to pay when your entire team dies mid lane. Spoiler. Okay, so if you see this many people on the sweeper, just ult in. Okay, so then I'm onto the Lulu Ziggs. The Ziggs goes over the wall. I take a lot of damage and don't end up getting a lot of value, but I get a good stationary W because the Mordekai's are in the set. If you can play off your ally CC in fights, then you can get pretty good value out of your W. Okay. It's a very tricky situation here with the Ziggs. So I want to heal up before we would approach him because I don't really care to kill him. Because if we try and fail, then we don't get dragon. But my team goes very quickly into him. When I'm healing off the minions, waiting for dragon to spawn. Okay, I take a Q, which I really shouldn't. The Misfortune is trying to zone the Ziggs. Okay, and then I get taunted by Shin, and my life is over. Okay. And there's no way we get dragon from there. So let's fast forward past the recalls. The enemy, the enemy gets dragon. My team goes for a fight afterwards. They kill Nunu. Okay, they kill Nunu, but then Shin ults the Aphelios, and then they try to chase down my team, but then they're chasing into Misfortune ult and Mordekaiser and Set, and end up getting turned on pretty hard because, again, if you have these melee champions trying to force high-range champions on their team to go in, it's not going to work out that well because they just simply don't have the tools to do so. And if they overcommit like this, then they die for it. Just in general, nothing to do with Fiddlesticks, but something you should be very, very conscious of, whether you're playing against or with or as those champions. So it's back into a full clear. I'm full clearing, waiting for basically my team to like reset and then be back on the map, and then to have a lane pushed out as well. Dude, I ult over their wall because I think Aphelios is there, and then he ends up not being there. It's pretty unlucky, but not the end of the world. It's a very, very, very long game. So if Aphelios stationary in the mid lane, this is the path I take. They probably don't see me walking in here because this is about the range of the Fog of War, if not this. So with this path into their jungle, I'm most likely in the Fog of War where we were already playing around the Baron for so long. That's probably where all their wards are. You can use the effigy to spot out if an area is warded. It's not necessarily going to tell you the whole story because if this bush is warded, if this is warded, if that's warded, then they saw you coming anyways. But you can use it at least if you want to ult over, then the enemy, you can know if the enemy has vision exactly right there, because even if they had vision of you walking in the red side, then they might not know if you're immediately ulting over or not. It's also 30 minutes in, and then I have 48 ability power from the Gathering Storm alone. So let's see how this fight plays out. Slow this down a little bit. So I ult over, I immediately Q, that's one Arcane Comet proc, and then I E the Aphelios. Unfortunately, I don't get the silence onto Lulu. And then I'm still walking past them. The Aphelios almost instantly dies, and as you can see, my Arcane Comet's coming back up pretty soon. I'm in between two tanks here, which makes it kind of awkward. So I'm just trying to get like a little bit more damage off. Two Arcane Comet procs, not that impactful as Aphelios instantly died. And I couldn't get on the Ziggs or the Lulu. So I'm trying to buy some space there because I know the Lulu, Shin, Nunu can't kill me. Very, very awkward trade. So then I'm going to go back, get this into full clearing because it's so important that I get my Void Staff at a reasonable timing. So I want to full clear into the next Baron play, and that's what I look to do. I full clear, entire team's reset towards the Elder Dragon spawn, and I'm not ulting immediately because I don't have my entire team here. Like, even though this looks kind of okay, you know, two key targets here along with Ziggs behind them. My Heimerdinger's right here, my Misfortune's pretty far behind me, and my Mordekaiser's in the bot lane. So if I'm going in here, I'm literally just in a 1v3, and there's no reason to do that, especially where the dragon hasn't spawned yet. It would really just be overdoing things. So I can see this position as they try to advance towards it, and they ward it, and once this is warded, like I don't actually, you just can't uphold this position against the Ziggs. It's not happening. So we relocate to the, near the blue buff, so that we can have an entrance into the dragon, because if we're just standing right here, the Ziggs can cut us off until the end of time. So you have to move around here, and since we have the time with the dragon spawning, then it's the best play. So I have a couple plays from here. I can ult from here, I can ult from upwards towards blue buff, or I can try to get behind everything and then ult over that wall. And since the enemy's positioning like they are, that's what I aim to do. They have a good play in which they could have pushed mid lane here. So I use the effigy right here to block the vision there, and then since the enemy's all basically in this area, it's going to be very easy for me to ult over, even though they know I'm there, because they have to try to fight for this dragon, because I'm pretty sure it's soul point. And then if they do, then I have this good ult angle against them. And since they try to kite into me, whenever they do this, you just simply walk away. Mordekaiser can ult the Nunu, and we secure the dragon without me even having to be there. Now, Mordekaiser kind of breaks some rules here, because he can ult the Nunu, but still not a terrible play. Because it gives the entire enemy team no options, and if they get that dragon, doesn't really matter. It's not soul for us, but I don't think it was soul for them either. Okey-doke, and then I regroup with my team, and then we go for Baron. We get the Baron, I have Void Staff, and now we're really in control because we can push down a lane and I have enough damage to kill the enemy team once I'm on them. So at this stage the Aphelios has QSS and then 4 items. The Lulu has Locket Ardent. The Shin has 2 MR items. The Nunu has basically 2 MR items in Spirit Visage and Negatron Cloak. I'm level 18 to Nunu's 16, and then the rest of my team mostly has level leads. No, they all have level leads. You love to see it. So we're finally in control, and it's time to actually attack the enemy because I have the Void Staff, I have Spellbinder, I have Banshees, I have enough items, and I'm level 18. So especially with level 16 on Fiddlesticks, your rank 3 ult becomes so important for your power in the late game, regardless of your items. So I'm like as powerful as I'm going to get here, and so is the rest of my team, and we have Baron, so it's looking good. Whenever the enemy wards one spot that you could be standing in, just go to another. Even if you clear the ward, it's not worth to stand in that same spot basically all the time. Okay, so again, this is how Nunu Shin is going to kill their allies, is by going for engages like this. So Misfortune simply flashes away, and now the entire enemy team is really ruined because how is Aphelios going to do anything? Lulu can't do anything. Wait, this is Ziggs, so how is Ziggs going to do anything? How is Aphelios going to do anything? Like, if Ziggs throws a bomb, it goes to about here. So it's really just Nunu and Shin stranding themselves. And then I'm waiting for the enemy to like really move too far forward before I spin my ult. I'm very, very patient with it, as you should look to be. Because if you blow it if you blow it too soon, especially in Vision, then it's really hard to do anything with it. So I ult in, I use the Spellbinder, a set with not a great ult, and then I'm waiting for them to come out of the Let's slow this down actually. So even if I wanted to like wrap around here and be kind of where Set is, it would take me too long as this fight's already going on, so I don't aim to do that. I can still kind of ult from the Fog of War from about this position, but it's going to be basically impossible for me to do that. But I do have the luxury of like the chaos going on, so it's like if you're playing this from Aphelios and Ziggs perspective, like they probably only really see this and not so much the Fiddlesticks, especially on top of a Baron Cannon minion. Things like this you can really abuse. So even if I'm ulting and like playing Vision, they might not play around it as well. So as I ult in, I Q the Aphelios, and then I try to stay in a position in which like I can't get polymorphed by Lulu, and then can stay onto their carries. But Aphelios QSS's Set ults him out of my ult, which feels really bad, and then Ziggs is Zhonya's, so I can't actually like spend a W here, and that would have killed them for sure. And then I immediately flash away because I don't want to get CC'd by the Nunu's E, and the Ziggs kind of helps me out with that one. And then I try to get out of there. Not a good fight at all. So with fights like that, everything's delayed, and then I go back to farming because I can still complete Morello, and then also buy Blue Pot, and those are other items that I can add to get more power in the game. And there's really nothing else to do until the Elder Dragon spawns. Okie dokie, so same deal, I'm trying to flank in the same way. Luckily this time I have the control ward and the fight is starting right here, so these champions are going to be kind of locked into about this spot. So even if I have to ult over the wall from here to here, then that's going to be okay. It does suck that I don't have Zhonya's at this stage, but it's just something I have to deal with. Okey-doke, so as I'm ulting, let's slow it all the way down. Okay, so the redemption is used very early. That's good on them. I use the Q onto Lulu so that I can get the most damage off, and then the QSS from Aphelios, get the full drain off on the Shin, so I don't end up killing all of them, but I deal too much damage for them to even come close to winning that fight solo. I deal all this damage basically solo. It's like one turret shot from the Heimerdinger, and that's mostly it. And then the Misfortunal onto the Nunu, and then the rest of the damage is mostly me. Mostly me. My team did a lot of damage, but where I chunk them all that hard, it secures the dragon for us and makes it so that they really don't have any good options. So then we get Ocean Soul at 38 minutes. The enemy, what even happens here? Jesus. For some reason, Shin taunts in and instantly dies. The Aphelios and Ziggs are sticking around. Like, they were trying to like push down mid as we were taking dragon, but it's really just not the play there. And I think that's it. And it's not, of course not. Alrighty, so we get the mid inhib, we reset towards Baron. They Shin ult the Nunu. We end up securing Baron because of Mordekaiser ult for like the 1000th time. And then I'm trying to kite this out, waiting for the enemy to move their carries into about this position, because that's my good ult angle onto them. So let's slow this down again. Still trying to save my ult for as long as possible, because until they get someone onto Misfortune that matters, I'm just going to position about right here. In retrospect, watching this, like, I'm way too far back at this stage because it's obviously just hard to tell what's going on in the actual team fight. But where they walk away, our best play is to go into the top side with Baron buff. So that's what we look to do. Because if I ult into them and they simply walk away, my team can't follow up, and then it's just not a successful play. I try to position right here to get like a cheeky ult onto them if they were to walk this way towards the bot lane versus going taking this path into their base. And then right here, the second they show, I'm going to ult over every single time, because it's just the Lulu and the Ziggs and Aphelios, so they don't have any good protection like for themselves, especially when I lead like this. So I ult, I Q, I E, he's almost instantly dead, and then I try to get onto the Ziggs for the W, and that's that. Where Lulu wasn't there, it was kind of lucky, but even if Lulu was, I would just have to keep walking on the Aphelios and then use my drain. Your auto attacks on turrets are going to deal a lot of damage at this stage if you have a lot of AP, so 430 per auto. It's very important, just lash them out, and that's that. Okay, very long game. Didn't expect it to be that long, but yeah. Kind of the benefits of using Arcane Comet is that you can have that overkill amount of damage, especially through a lot of peel, and especially into high range champions, such as this game with the Aphelios, Ziggs, and Lulu. If you were against even more ranged champions, it would become a bit better, because your damage to them would become way more impactful, and against tank champions, you're obviously going to be losing some value. But hope these two examples of the Aftershock and Arcane Comet games actually help you in your matches, and yeah. Okay, and that's it. That's everything I got for Fiddlesticks. It's like all I could put into this video. With this video, I aim to inform people of everything about Fiddlesticks, and I'm glad that I could give back to League in this sort of way. Like whenever I started playing League, the videos that really helped me the most were videos pretty similar. Things like LS's coaching helped me a lot and still does. So I hope that I could just pass even just a little bit of something like that on to everyone who watched this video. And yeah, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you're interested in contributing to me some way, you can just like the video and subscribe to the channel. A bigger aim of this channel is videos like this, in which um, I just put a lot, like put basically everything into it. And I'm also going to be having mostly a lot of my gameplay coming up as I got to play some League. I've been putting so much time into this video. You can also support me by donating. That link's below. I don't expect anything, but if you really feel the need to, you could. And if you're really interested in getting better at League, I also offer coaching. It's currently $20 an hour. That price could fluctuate, especially across time. So that information is below. That updated information is probably below. And with the coaching, we just get in a Discord call. I watch your game. We talk about the game. It can be a lot of different things. We can do 1v1s, etc. So if you're really interested in getting better at League or have plateaued, that's mostly what coaching is for, and is a way that I can earn some money from it without just a donation, where you can get some value too. So all that information is below. I want to thank you so much for watching the video, and that's really it. Glad to be here. Love gaming. Peace out. Thanks for watching.